Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto has hollow zanpakuto in Bleach. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Hakon2Feb and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. Are you kidding me? It was a stormy night in Soul Society. Dark clouds littered the sky and heavy rain fell on anyone who were unlucky enough to have guard duty. The only lights were those made to illuminate houses and the occasional bolt of lightning that would tear through the darkness. Most farmers would praise the rain, for it was a blessing after 2 weeks of dry weather. But then there were those that couldn't help but feel that this storm was an ominous sign that something that should never happen was set in motion. Captain Commander Genryusai Yamamoto of the 13 Court Guard squads sat in his office in the 1st Division barracks. He was the oldest Shinigami still alive, and he had the scars to prove it. His long wide eyebrows frame his face, and just above them, he had a cross-shaped scar. His eyes could see through a person and spoke of great wisdom only obtained from years and years of experience. He has a long white beard and mustache, which is a contrast to his black Soul Reaper kimono. Over his shoulders, he wears a white haori with the 1st Division insignia clearly visible on the back, and by his right side is a big wooden cane that conceals his zanpakuto. Not for the first time this night, the Captain Commander gives a weary sigh. Only he and a select few are aware of what the ominous weather means. Bring me Sui Feng. Yamamoto says to no one in particular, and yet he knows that his order will be followed to the letter. Not for the first time in his life did the Captain Commander wonder if his subordinates could so easily forget that he had over 1,000 years of experience. And not for the first time did the Captain Commander think back to the events that happened roughly 50 years ago. It was raining that night as well. That night, when 4 captains, 3 vice captains and the lieutenant of the Kido Corps were turned into Shinigami Hollow hybrids and had to flee Soul Society, along with the captain of the Kido Corps, the captain of Squad 12, and the captain of Squad 2. Even 50 years later, there was still problems with friction between the new captains. Sui Feng reporting, sir. And just like that, the Captain Commander was brought out of his thoughts. He let his eyes drift over her body and took in her sleeveless haori with yellow sash, grey eyes, and short black hair with 2 long braids ending in golden rings and a sword strapped horizontally along her lower back. She looked to be in her 20s, but the Captain Commander knew better. Soul Reapers aged far slower than humans, after all. This was indeed the captain of the 2nd Division, as well as the leader of the Stealth Force and the Punishment Squad. Yamamoto took a few seconds to compose himself because he knew that what he was about to say was not only top secret but also of grave importance to Soul Society. How do you feel lately, Sui Feng? Yamamoto let the question stay open because he didn't want to force her to say anything. As good as always, sir. I'm ready for duty. Both knew the first statement was a lie. Sui Feng felt deeply betrayed when the previous captain of the 2nd Squad, Uruchi Shihoin, left Soul Society roughly 50 years ago. But she also knew that the Captain Commander wouldn't press it unless something important happened. Good. What I am about to tell you is a secret only a handful of people know. You are not to tell anyone except those already involved in the secret. Is that clear? The last phrase was laced with a bit of spiritual pressure. Not enough for any physical discomfort, but enough to show that he was serious. Yes, sir. I will take this secret to the grave if necessary. She knew that the Captain Commander's word was law and she knew what it felt like to be betrayed. She would not be the one to break the Captain Commander's trust. Excellent, but before I begin, I think some backstory is in order so you may grasp the full picture. Roughly 400 years ago, there was a huge battle waged between humans in a place which at that time was called the Elemental Nations. These humans had special powers that they called chakra. These special powers were not unlike Kido or the special effects of a zanpakuto. 12th Squad. Research and Development. While the storm was pounding on the roofs, sparks were flying inside the research and development facility. One apparatus had arcs of electricity run between 2 metal rods, while another was rotating and giving off sparks to all sides. A man was hunched over an operating table, where a white blanket was covering something that looked like a human body with several wires attached to it. Igor, we need more power. The man had a gleam in his eyes. His white coat emblazoning the Squad 12 mark on the back. He simply lived for experiments such as this. The storm was the perfect condition and he would partially use it for this particular experiment. Yes, master. Was the answer from his assistant, a black-haired woman that looked to be in her late 20s. She had black hair and a single large braid going down her back, dark green eyes and a heart-shaped face. On her left arm she has a vice captain badge that clearly says 12th Squad. Do we really have to do this? She asks, in a rare show of emotions. Yes, we do. Now shut up and follow the script. Mayuri Kuritsuchi said, clearly annoyed that his vice captain had ruined the atmosphere. Yes, sir. Barely audible she said. I blame Vice Captain Matsumoto for forcing us all to watch that vampire werewolf movie, although it did give me some ideas to new weapons I can use without knowing it. Her captain had the exact same thoughts. Those SAWS-1 could deal some damage as well as be useful during dissections. Achoo. On the other side of Sarate, an orange-haired woman could be heard sneezing in her office in the 10th squad. Captain, I think the weather is making me sick. Can I take the rest of the day off? Absolutely not, Ranjiku. There is far too much paperwork as there is. Besides, you haven't been outside since yesterday, so how would you get sick? Captain Toshiro Hitsugaya was not amused. His vice captain would take any chance she got to relax and drink her sake. Oh, but Captain. Very well. An evil glint in his eye. You can either continue your work or walk all the way to Squad 4 in the rain for a checkup. If they say you are ill, you will be allowed to walk back and rest for the day. Fine, let it be known that Ranjiku was no fan of rain. 12th squad. Research and development. Just then, a lightning bolt struck a metal conductor on the roof of the facility. The lightning, along with concentrated spiritual particles, was sent to a machine. This machine would regulate the flow and then send it into the body on the operating table. The body then arched its back against the restraints that held the hands and feet in place. The whole body would twitch violently before the steady bleeping sound from a machine would sound out. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. Somewhere in the afterlife, a certain Victor Frankenstein was a very proud man. Mayuri Kuritsuchi had a smile that could split his face, and with his body modifications, it probably did. The experiment had gone just as planned, and it was now up to him to see if it was a success or not. First squad, captain's office. Sui Feng was shocked. Her lower jaw would have hit the floor had she not had the training from both the stealth force and the punishment squad. Let me make this clear. Research and development are working on cloning the strongest fighter from possibly the most intense war in human history. We are doing this as a response to the growing strength of the hollows in Hueco-Mundo. That is correct, Sui Feng. Although not the entire truth, but that is for me to know until certain events unfold. And since they were known to fight in a similar way as the stealth force, you want me to supervise his training. Correct again. If he is to help us keep balance, then it would be best if he is a top physical condition. Someone knocking on the door interrupted anything else that could be said. Yamamoto, of course, knew who it was, for he was expecting to hear from them eventually. Enter was Yamamoto's only response to the interruption. In came Nemu Kuritsuchi, who quickly bowed to the captain commander. Report. Was the only word Yamamoto spoke, trying not to sound too excited. Sir, the experiment was a success. Would you like to observe it for yourself? Nemu was soaking wet, clearly showing what to expect should anyone venture outside in the storm. Yes, of course. Please lead the way. Sui Feng, please join us, you need to see this as well. 12th squad. Research and development. Mayuri Kuritsuchi is standing next to the operating table. His face is black, with the outer edges and the nose painted white. His eyes are a golden color, and golden cones protect his ears and chin. To complete the outfit, he wears a hat with 2 long points going to his right, a purple scarf, and he has 1 long nail on his middle finger. I'm so glad you could make it at such a short notice, Captain Commander. This truly is an interesting specimen. The head of research and development was obviously very excited to be working on this project. Those who knew him could see the clear signs that the 12th captain would most likely lock himself inside the lab until there was no more data to collect from his new test subject. I trust everything went as expected. Yamamoto could see the clear outline of the body that was on the operating table, the slow rising and falling over the chest area, a clear sign that the person was alive. There were some complications, and we had to use the same Gigai technology that was used on Nemu because the soul was too unstable. As an afterthought, he added. It was almost like this person had several souls tightly woven together with his own, but that is unheard of in the records from Sarate. Yamamoto was slightly troubled by this news, but kept a blank face. Do you believe there will be any side effects because of this? Mayuri looked like he couldn't care either way. Most likely because it would give him more data to study. At this point, we can't say for sure. The best thing we can do is continue to monitor him for any changes. According to his brain activity, he should remain unconscious for at least a week. Inside mysterious person's mind, 9 figures could be seen standing in a circle on top of what looked like a seal with a yin-yang emblem in the middle. You could barely see the outlines of the figures, but if you looked closely, you could see that they were all looking towards the center of the circle. There was a man who lay on his back in the center of the circle. His sun-kissed almost yellow hair was spiky on top with 2 chin-long bangs framing his face, and in the back, it went down to shoulder length in a messy ponytail. On his cheeks, he had 3 black lines that looked almost like whiskers. Along with the messy blonde hair, he had had those since the day he was born. He lay there in the clothes he wore while he was alive. A knee-length burnt orange coat with arms and a hood that had several seals inside. Although you couldn't see it, there was 9 spirals forming a square on the back of it. On his chest, he wore a tight black muscle shirt with 3 red slashes, going from left shoulder to right hip. The shirt did little to hide the sleek muscles underneath it. He wore baggy black pants with 6 pockets and was taped to his ankles before his feet ended in wooden jutta. Suddenly, the man began to stir, and this was what the 9 figures had been waiting for. He slowly opened his eyes to reveal deep Pacific blue eyes that were slightly unfocused. He blinked a few times before he sat up and looked around. He gave a small smile when he recognized the 9 figures, but then he frowned. If this is Ito Tensei, then I'm gonna kick some ass once I get out of here. The 9 figures snickered a bit at that, glad to hear the voice of the man once again. One of them then spoke in a deep male voice. It is good to see you again, but you as well as we should be aware that Ito Tensei is impossible after what you did. We all knew it had to be done, but you needed balls to propose that all chakra, except what was necessary to live, was to be sealed off permanently. The man rubbed the back of his head while looking sheepish. His face and body was that of a man in his early 20s, but the eyes showed that he had many years of experience. Yeah. With the use of chakra, wars escalated to the point of genocide, and after the last big battle, I think everyone was tired of fighting. It didn't take much to convince everyone that it was necessary. Like if the figure in front of him could read his mind, it spoke. Although our power have been weakened after being dead for who knows how long, we are unable to sense anyone with the ability to use chakra. Our conclusion is that whoever brought us back did it with other means, and that the sealing you did was most likely a success. The man looked slightly relieved. Well, since we have established that, then perhaps it's time to see who wanted us so bad that they had to bring us back to life. I agree. The sooner you wake up, the sooner we can figure out what's going on. I doubt I need to warn you, but I will say it anyways. Don't mention us if you can. After all, we don't know what they know, so they have the upper hand for now. You got it. Take care, Kurama. We will see you soon, Kit. 12th Squad. Research and Development. The monitors by the operating table began to flash and bleep faster. Deep breathing could be heard, compared to the shallow breaths earlier that indicated a coma-like state. Everyone in the room, Mayuri included, was shocked by this. Here was a person that was supposed to be in a coma state for another week, and he just woke up. No one was quite sure what would happen next until the man on the table spoke. I can only see white. Man, I hope I'm not in the hospital again. Sakura would kill me. They all were surprised by this, but Mayuri recovered quickly and said, at any rate, it looks like the universal translator works. Nemu, remove the blanket so our test subject might see us. The blanket was folded so the body from the stomach to head was uncovered. The man on the table squinted in the bright light before his eyes adjusted and he put a frown on his face. He had seen enough of Orochimaru's test subjects to know that he hated that name. The captains were all on the same side of the operating table, so the man only needed to turn his head to get a good look at them. Okay, so we have an old man who could pass for an older Hiruzen Sarutobi, a guy that smiles like Orochimaru, a woman that could pass as Kabuto, although I don't sense anything sinister about her, and finally a woman who holds loneliness and pain inside her. Before anyone has the time to say anything, they all hear a great rumbling, and the man looks at them sheepishly. Hey, you don't have any food here, do you? I would prefer ramen, but if you don't have any at hand I can take anything. The people there just gaped until Nemu came in with some soup in a large bowl. She filled a smaller bowl and took a spoon before she started to feed the man. After giving him the 4th bowl, he smiled and thanked her for the delicious food. Okay, so I don't know why I'm here, where here is, or what you want with me. I can tell that you brought me back for a reason, and I don't feel any pain, so I assume that it went like planned. I would shake your hand, but mine are a bit tied up at the moment, so I guess I'll just introduce myself. I am a ninja from Konohagakure no Sato or Konoha for short, and my name is Naruto Uzumaki. Reincarnations from the past. While Sakura was walking around in Sarate, she suddenly spotted the most gravity-defying gray hair that she had ever seen. She couldn't believe it. Naruto had told her that the 3 of them were the only ones that were brought back, but that gravity-defying hair could only belong to one person. Quickly running over, she lunges for the person and ends up toppling them both over. In joyous disbelief she cries out, Kakashi-sensei. It's been so long. Taking a second she gets a good look at him. Kakashi-sensei, why are you so short? And what are you doing here with Anko Mitarashi? Stunned to say anything, his vice captain steps in. Look here, honey. I'm not sure who you are calling Kakashi and Anko, but I am Ranjiku Matsumoto, and this is my captain, Toshiro Hitsugaya. Are you sure? The way you dress I was sure you were Anko. Perhaps the memories will come back once you try to taste a bit of my blood. Out of confusion, the only thing Ranjiku could do was attack. Growl Hineko. Her zanpakuto turned into dust that started to swirl around her. You bitch. I killed Sasori of the Red Sand. Do you honestly think a bit of ash could bring me down? Big catfight begins. Just like Tsunade would have done, the fight ended after 5 minutes and both decided to go get drunk. In the world of the living, Hinata was sitting with Ichigo and the others on the roof of Karakura High School. She was squinting her eyes, trying to look for something that must obviously be there. The usually stoic Urashida was getting a little uncomfortable. You have been staring at me for the past 20 minutes. Do I have something in my face? Are my glasses funny? Niji Nyasan, don't you remember me? Fate made it so we would meet again. The confused Uryu had no idea what Hinata was talking about. With a frightened look, he stood up and took a step backwards when Hinata began shouting about the power of youth. By the time she had hinged into a man with a bowl cut, big eyebrows and a green spandex suit, he had already fled the rooftop. Uryu was the only one that didn't have to go to mental therapy after seeing the incredibly dangerous Genjutsu where two almost identical green spandex-clad men were hugging in front of a big sunset. Chapter 2. Wake me up when my duty calls. 12th Division. Research and Development. The Captain Commander quickly hid his surprise to see the person that were on the operating table. He wasn't surprised by how the person looked, but more to the point what he had said. Not to seem rude, he quickly did the round of introductions. It was after all, common courtesy to introduce yourself when someone gave their own name. My name is Genryusai Yamamoto. I am the Captain Commander of the 13 Court Guard Squads of Soul Society. To my right is 2nd Captain Soifon, leader of the Punishment and Stealth Force. To my left is 12th Captain Mayuri Kuritsuchi and his vice captain and daughter, Nimu Kuritsuchi. They were the ones who resurrected you on my orders. The blonde was squinting his eyes, as if looking for any lies or deceit. Seemingly finding none, the blonde gave a fox-like grin and said in an even tone. Never heard of the Soul Society, but I guess there was a limit to how much of the world I could travel after my wives died. Say, since you brought me back, would it be possible to bring them back as well? Before anyone could say anything, he added. And it's not like they were just my wives either. Sakura was the strongest person I knew in terms of muscle power, and she was also the greatest medic nin in the entire elemental nations. And Hinata was a fierce fighter with her clan style, as well as a great scout. He spoke it with great pride in his voice, showing that he had a lot of confidence in his late wives. The Captain Commander sent a questioning look to the 12th Captain. Already knowing the silent question, Mayuri then spoke. It would be possible, since for some reason, neither of you were sent here nor turned into hollows after your death. However, it will take some time. The blonde would have tilted his head in confusion if he could. What do you mean hollow? I had 2 wonderful wives, lots of children, friends, a family and a bunch of people looking up to me. Before he could say more, the Captain Commander interrupted him. The hollow is a term we soul reapers use when the soul of a recently died person gives into despair. So if that is true, then I might have turned into a hollow had I died before I became a genin, Naruto mused. I agree, you were quite miserable at that time, but enough of the trip down memory lane. You need to learn more, since you are in a lack of better term, a stranger in a strange land. With that, Naruto returned focus to what was happening around him. And that is why we have brought you back. We need your help in response to the increasing strength of the hollows. In Naruto's opinion, he could have been resurrected for weirder reasons, but if they needed him, who was he to deny them help? I am honored that you feel I could make a difference. From what you say, these hollows have existed for quite some time. However, it will be some time before I'm back to full working capacity. Yamamoto was visibly relaxing. Despite how dire the situation might become, he would never have forced someone to help defeat his enemies. Such an ally would only end up turning against you in the long run. Summoning a hell butterfly, the Captain Commander said. Captain of the 4th Division is to get her alone as fast as possible for a health checkup. Once that was done, he said in a more pleasant voice. Since you are awake, you can leave here once the captain of the 4th Division, my chief of medicine, has done a proper checkup on you. A few minutes later, the captain of the 4th Division, Anohanaretsu, arrives. She is a calm woman with dark pale blue eyes and black hair and a long braid going down her front. She carries her sword over her shoulder in a piece of rope that is fastened at both ends of the scabbard. She looks very serene, but if Naruto knows something, it is to never piss off a medic. In a pleasant tone she asks. You summoned me, Captain Commander. What can I do for you this evening? Anohana was usually accompanied by her vice captain, Isen Katetsu, so since the hell butterfly had said to come alone meant that it was something urgent and probably secret. Thank you for making it on such short notice, Anohana. This young man over here is Naruto Uzumaki. He has recently been resurrected and I would like you to give him a checkup to see if he is well enough to start his training. Hello, Uzumaki-san. My name is Anohanaretsu. If you would please be still for just a moment, I will see if there is anything wrong with you. Nodding slightly, Anohana activates her healing Kaido, and moves her hands over Naruto's body. This is strange. This body not only has the normal Reiryoku spiritual power I would expect, but also has canals that contain a different power source. Reaching the stomach area, the fourth captain suddenly gasps and backs away. In a slightly alarmed voice, she speaks. Captain Commander, I sense 9 additional souls within this person's body, along with a network for a currently unknown power source located in his stomach area. In a stern voice, she adds. What are you trying to create here? Laughing softly, all attention turns to the blonde on the table. I can't believe you would resurrect me without knowing the first thing about me. To explain the network you found, it is a form of energy called chakra. After the last war, it was decided that any excess chakra would be sealed off to prevent mass-scale destruction. Since it looks like I will be helping you guys save the world, then it might be necessary to unseal it in the future. Taking a deep breath and also looking into the eyes of everyone in the room, as if piercing their souls to judge them, the blonde continues. The 9 souls you felt are spiritual being bound to me for eternity. While in life, they were the reason why I was among the strongest people to ever live. Thanks to this new energy I can feel in me, there is a large chance I will be among the most powerful in death as well. The Shinigami in the room were all taken aback by that statement. The way the blonde was so casually talking about it and the belief that he could measure up to Shinigami with several hundred years of experience was almost outrageous. Taking their shocked silence as a sign to continue, the blonde did just that. Thanks to those 9 spirits, my body has a high metabolism as well as regenerative abilities. Anything less than removing my head or completely obliterating my body, I can survive. Due to this, I would say that unless there is anything wrong with my new energy source, I believe you called it spiritual power, I should be good to at least leave this place. As an afterthought, he added. I have a great dislike for being in hospitals, so the faster we can do this, the better for me. Most of those in the room had the same thought at that moment. Who does this person think he is? Quickly recovering, Nemu was sent to retrieve some temporary clothing for the blonde. While that was happening, the captain commander decided to give Naruto some information. Now, while you live here, you will train and work directly under Squad 2 and Captain Soifon. She will teach you the necessary skills in using your new spiritual powers, as well as help you manifest your own Zanpakuto soul cutter sword. You will receive special missions directly from me, but mostly, your day-to-day duty will be that to the 2nd Division. Just then, Nemu was back with the clothes. Naruto grumbled a bit about there not being any orange. After making sure everyone had their backs turned, Naruto changed into the standard Shinigami uniform. Once clothed, the others excused themselves, and Naruto was led to the 2nd Division barracks. On the way there, Soifon gives him general information about her division. Listen up. My division consists of the Stealth Force and the Punishment Squad. The general duty of the 2nd Division is stealth operations, assassinations and upholding the law in Sirte. We specialize in stealth, speed, restraining Kido Bakudo, and hand-to-hand combat. Your cover story is that you used to live in the lower Rukongai districts. I saw you defending a mother and her child against the Yakuza with your bare hands. Seeing your potential, I decided to take you in as my apprentice. On a side note, since you were deemed one of the strongest while alive, I expect you to rise fast in the ranks. Once you have gained the necessary experience in using your soul powers, I hope you will challenge my vice captain for his title. Marichio Amida is a fat and lazy man who only got the seat because of his family and its wealth. Also, during training, you will refer to me as sensei or master, while on duty, you will call me captain. After taking a few minutes to think it all through, Naruto replies in a solemn voice. Thank you for doing this for me, captain. I swear that I won't ever let you down. And don't worry about the training. I can take anything you can throw at me. Giving a small smile to that, Soifon leads them into the barracks of the 2nd Division. There they are met by the vice captain. He is a tall man with short black hair that clings to his head, except for on the top, where it connects to create a spiker fin-like protrusion. He has small black eyes, large lips and a purple collar on the normal Shinigami outfit. He is eating from a bag of rice crackers, and on his fingers you can see several rings with jewels on them. In a casual voice he says, "Hey captain. Who's the blonde pipsqueak? I bet he's just some poor commoner, since he's so skinny." Before Soifon has a chance to scold her vice captain, Naruto bows and says in a humble tone. It is an honor to meet you, Vice Captain Amida. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I used to live in the lower Rukongai districts. The reason for why I'm here is because your captain asked me to become her apprentice after she witnessed me defending a mother and her child from the Yakuza. Originally shocked by this, since his captain had never taken an apprentice in all her 50 years of captain, Amida paid it little heed. His captain was after all a taskmaster, so he would bet that this commoner would soon end up dead. Soifon, slightly impressed with how Naruto had handled the situation, then spoke. Naruto will be trained in the same methods as the 2nd Division. I will oversee his training in Kido Spirit Way, Hoho Fast Movement, and Zanjutsu Swordsmanship. He will fight other squad members in order to train his Hakuta White Hits hand-to-hand, while you will oversee his physical exercises. Without waiting for a reply, she went into the 2nd Division barracks with Naruto in tow. Amida could only scratch his head as he watched them go. Munching on a fistful of rice crackers, he said to himself. Such a weak commoner doesn't even deserve to be in the presence of our great captain. Since I'm so wealthy, perhaps I should invite him to my home and brag about all my riches. Once inside, Naruto was shown to where he would be staying. The vice captain had made sure to show off his wealth by installing flashy features like automatic doors, queen-size beds, a well-supplied kitchen and a bathroom with walk-in shower and a bathtub that could fit 2 people comfortably. All in all, with a big living room with a corner couch, tea table and dinner table that could hold 4 people, the entire thing was a bit bigger than the apartment Naruto had rented while he was still a child. Naruto had a feeling living quarters like these were held off for important guests and high-ranking officers. It was certainly nice, although without anyone else there it felt kind of empty to one blonde ninja. Not that being alone was such a foreign concept, it was more along the lines that Naruto had come to get used to always be with his family after he had married Sakura and Hinata. Shortly before marrying them, he had hired carpenters to make what would later be called the Uzumaki clan compound. Flashback. Azuna was standing at the edge of a flat and deforested area, looking over the plans for his next great project. Before Naruto had the area deforested, he had made sure not to disturb any of the deer that lived in the forest. The compound would be located close to both the Nara and Inuzuka clans. Quite fitting for Naruto to remain close to some of those he considered his best friends. I thank you once again for doing this for me, Tazuna. You are doing me a great honor by constructing my future home. Think nothing of it, Naruto. It's the least I could do for one of the heroes from Wave. Although it won't be as big as the bridge, I can assure you that it will be one of my masterpieces. Giving a hearty laugh, Naruto says. It feels so long ago, and yet it has only been a little over 6 years since that time. I'm really glad I could help Wave. Seeing you and Inari so happy is well worth it. Inari was quite eager once he heard who hired us. He has been working hard all this time just to impress you. Just then, both Hinata and Sakura walked over to them. Hinata has her hair down to the middle of her back. She was dressed in an indigo kimono with white snowflakes going down the sides. Sakura had grown her hair out a bit since the war and now had it at just below shoulder length. She wore a deep crimson kimono with black sakura petals. They both went over to Naruto, each giving him a quick kiss, then putting their heads on each of his shoulders. So these are your wives, huh? You are a lucky man, Naruto, always remember that. Wrapping his arms around both girls, he gives a large grin. Oh, I know Tazuna. I know. Flashback end. After getting a short tour around the apartment, Soifon handed Naruto a sword. This is your Asauchi. A zanpakuto is an extension of the person's soul. Your zanpakuto doesn't have a name yet, but if you keep it with you at all times, it will eventually tell you. Also, if your spiritual pressure keeps rising at the rate it has all day, then you will have to suppress it. You see, since the zanpakuto is an extension of a person's soul, the length is proportional to the person's spiritual pressure. My last words to you tonight are the following. If you take good care of your zanpakuto, then it will take good care of you as well. Alone in his apartment, Naruto sits down in the couch with his sword. It was an average-looking katana with a blade length of 28.6 inches, 71.12 centimeters. The tsuba, guard, looked like a straight, blunted 6-point shuriken. And the tsuka, handle, was 10.1 inches, 25.8 centimeters. The tsuka was a white background wrapped in black cloth. The saya, sheath, had a black glossy finish with a single orange line going the entire length. Naruto goes into a meditational trance, not just to sort through everything that has happened, but also for a little conversation. Inside Naruto's mind. No longer just vague shapes or outlines. There, before him, stood the 9-tailed beasts of legend. From left to right was Shukaku, the 1 tail, Matatabi, the 2 tails, Isobu, the 3 tails, Son Goku, the 4 tails, Kakuo, the 5 tails, Seiken, the 6 tails, Chimei, the 7 tails, Jayuki, the 8 tails and finally, Kurama, the 9 tails. It's a good thing that you guys along with my wives suggested I train in different weapons. I doubt I can match someone with several hundred years of experience, but once my body adapts, it wouldn't be long before I'm back to the level of a master swordsman. My last partner didn't do much but rap and play with those swords all day. Of course it would rub over to me. We were all glad to help out. Rumbled the 8 tails bull octopus hybrid. Naruto had gotten to know all the tailed beasts, but they were still most comfortable with Kurama speaking for them. Something about seniority. However, like just now, they would usually voice their opinion from time to time. It would be best if you train up your spiritual powers without the interference of chakra before you unlock your chakra again. If they had to resurrect us, we can expect some big fights in the future. They all gave big grins at that. Peace was well and good, but nothing made the blood pump in your veins like a good fight. While we are on the subject, you should see if you can take an easy mission back to Earth so you can unlock your chakra. You would need a big open space, and with the power you will be putting out, you might kill half the people in Soul Society. Good point, Kurama. It's easy to forget how much chakra I really had now that it is all sealed up. Good thing they revived me though, because I'm the only one who can unseal chakra alone. Anyone else would have died because of the procedure. Not to mention the complex seal that has to be drawn. Although you have a secondary power source now, I wouldn't recommend using up either one fully. Worst case, you might explode because your other power source would be too unstable to support itself. If that happened, then what pain did to Konoha wouldn't even begin to describe the destruction from the blast. Was it your spiritual powers that were gone? The blast would probably reach from Konoha to the Valley of the End. Now, what you should do is get some rest. Your spiritual powers will continue to climb until it's on the same level as your own chakra would have been. We estimate it will take about 3 months before your spiritual powers will end on a stable level. With that, Naruto went to sleep, dreaming about what he would do once his 2 wives were brought back to life. Shukaku-san. So I know that you two didn't like each other much from my conversations with Gaara. At least you, Shukaku, seem to deeply despise Kurama. Care to explain it to me? Shukaku mutters something that neither can hear. Okay, Naruto. First you need to know that it wasn't always like this. The 9 of us were all one happy family after we had been separated from the 10 tails. It was only after the Sage of 6 Paths died that we started to go our separate ways. We all loved the old man very much, so when he died, we all developed certain behaviors to cope with the loss. It was then that I developed my prankster nature, which you inherited. Some of those pranks really made me proud, kid. So it was all because of a prank. Shukaku hated you for hundreds of years because of a prank. Are you going to tell me what kind of prank it was? Well, one day, when Shukaku was asleep at the outskirts of a desert, I spent the night coloring his sand pink. Well, that is hardly a reason to hate someone for so long. Are you sure it wasn't that mad priest that influenced you to hate him? Kid, you know how I had Gaara use my sand to crush people. Well, I could never admit it at the time, but I made him do it because I liked it when the blood would cover my sand in that nice, almost pink color. Both Naruto and Kurama stood there with their jaws slack and hanging to the floor. Chapter 3. Meeting new faces. You know, I really didn't think it would be that big a deal. I mean, back where I'm from, if you had an apprentice no one would bat an eye. In the 2 weeks since Naruto was resurrected, most of the high-ranking officers of Tsurete had come over to meet him. They had for the most part been pleasant, but just like in the ninja world, there were some strange characters among the ranks. Of those he had already met, there was the ever-happy Ichimari Jin, his seemingly depressed vice-captain Izuru Kira, both of the 3rd Division. He wondered if Jin was some kind of happiness vampire and was stealing Kira's happiness. Then there was the calculating Sasuke-san and his fangirl of a vice-captain, Momo Hinamori, both of the 5th Division. Naruto had asked his captain in a hushed whisper if the 6th Division captain was related to the Hyuga. He at least looked the part with that stick up his ass. His vice-captain had been pleasant enough, although it looked like Renji Aburai had a rivalry with his captain for some reason. One day he was out training in Zanjutsu, he had suddenly felt a strong spiritual pressure and raw killing intent. He was out training, so he didn't think much of it. Suddenly, he felt the killing intent closing in, and he rolled to the right just as what looked like a Chipnadachi came smashing down. His sleeve had been cut, and a slow stream of blood was running down his left hand as he stood up and looked over to the one who had attacked him. You know, interrupting someone's training and attacking them from behind isn't very nice. The big man stood over him. He had black hair set in long spikes, with what looked like small bells on the tip. He was easily 2 meters tall, had an eye patch on his right eye, and had a vertical scar going down the left side of his face. With him was a small girl with shoulder-length pink hair and what looked like a permanent blush. She was eyeing him with some interest. After what felt like several minutes, she was finally done examining his face and cried out happily. Hey, Mr. Spiky Fox-kun. Won't you please fight Kenny? It would make us both so happy if you did. Ichiro is right. I live for fighting, and only through fighting the strongest can I enjoy myself to the fullest. Soifan is about to step in, but realizes that this might be a valuable learning experience, as well as a chance to see some of the potential Naruto has. Naruto is also a bit curious to how he would stack up to a captain other than Soifan. Bowing he says. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I would be honored to fight you. However, should you wish to fight me in the future, I ask you to ask me first instead of almost chopping my arm off. Ending with a small grin, Kenpachi wasn't quite sure, but he had a feeling he would enjoy future fights with the blonde. I am Kenpachi Zaraki, captain of the 11th Division. I'm quite impressed that you stood up to my spiritual pressure and also managed to dodge my initial attack. Let's fight. Charging in, Kenpachi aims a vertical slash to try to split Naruto in half. Having sheatheded his sword after the initial attack, Naruto quickly draws it and tries to put up an overhead block with both hands. Almost too late does he realize that it won't be enough and again rolls to the right. Standing up again, he sees that the chipped blade has cut clean through the tip of his blade. Thinking fast, Naruto realizes that he can't continue to clash swords with his opponent, so he takes a stance with a sword in a firm two-hand grip in front of him and waits for the next attack. Not needing any more invitation than that, the 11th captain swings a horizontal cut from his left, fully intent on cleaving his opponent in two. Seeing this, Naruto rolls forward and in one smooth motion rises up, trying to cut into the side of his opponent. Imagine Morpheus from The Matrix Reloaded when he flips the car. Just a split second after rising fully, he is struck diagonally across the back. He cries out in pain and falls down to his knees. In a disbelieving voice, he asks, "How? I got past your defense and I felt that I connected." Walking into view, you could see that the clothing had been cut but not a drop of blood was visible. The torn clothing would indicate a lethal hit had it pierced the skin. Still with his back turned, he scoffs. "DSCH. Like that dull blade could ever cut me. Didn't you learn anything when you blocked my attack? When two spiritual powers clash, the strongest one will always win." Walking away, he calls out, "Time to go, Yuichiro. Don't want to miss my afternoon nap." Seeing that the fight is over and Kenpachi has left, Soifan walks over. When she gets close, she can see that the wound is already healed and the only indication that he was hurt is the blood that still remains on his clothing. Standing up, Naruto turns around and rubs the back of his head sheepishly. Well, I guess there are some differences in fighting a normal human compared to a Shinigami. Deciding to scold him a bit, Soifan flicks Naruto on the forehead with her finger, gaining his attention. "Don't you know it's dangerous to underestimate your opponent? Kenpachi Zaraki is one of the most ruthless captains in all of Soul Society. You are lucky to even be alive after a fight with him." Giving an easy grin and with nothing more needed to be said, they continue training. Over the next week, two other people visited Naruto. While practicing some low-level Kido spells, another tall man with spiky black hair approached Naruto. This one, however, had no visible scars on his face and his eyes were a serene aqua-green color. On his arm was the vice captain badge of the 13th Division. Following him was a short girl with shoulder-length black hair and dark purple eyes. Both bowed slightly before introducing themselves. "Hello. My name is Kane Shiba and I'm the vice captain of the 13th Division. With me, I have Rukia Kichiki, who is my apprentice. My captain, Jashira Yukitake, wanted to be her in person, but I'm afraid his health isn't what it used to be." Realizing right away that Kane was a decent man, Naruto gives a wide grin and bows as well. "It is an honor to meet you, sir. My name is Naruto Uzumaki and I'm the apprentice of Captain Soifan. I hope we can get to know each other better." After exchanging some idle chit-chat, Kane and Rukia decides to leave. Naruto, realizing that he has two new friends, attack the Kido lessons with new vigor. In his early years, although he never could do a proper Bunshin jutsu, Naruto was always proficient in the basics. He could do the Kawarimi body replacement without seals and had the henge transformation down to a science. He could do the henge so good that he invented the Warik no Jutsu sexy jutsu. Likewise, did he have trouble with some Kido, but some of the most basic he got down very good. After Soifan had explained how the incantations worked, Naruto soon realized that the incantation was no different from hand seals. The jutsu or Kido could be performed without them, but if you were already proficient in the jutsu or Kido, then using it would increase the power exponentially. Naruto also learned that saying the incantation in a louder voice would also increase the power of the Kido. Closing his eyes in concentration, Naruto spoke the incantation and pointed towards a big rock, 50 meters away. Thunderclouds gather. Wheel of Fate, focus, pierce. Break the bonds 2, Hado number 4 by Akurai pale lightning. Blue energy gathered around his finger before it shot forward in a straight line. The rock was left in smoking pieces and a single beam of pure destruction cut down 4 full-grown trees behind the rock. Both Naruto and Soifan were left gaping at the destruction. Naruto was a bit disappointed since it was his first try. Soifan, on the other hand, was amazed that he had made a 1-foot-wide Byakurai on his very first try. Without thinking, Naruto, with clear disappointment in his voice, starts complaining. "Aw, man. I was really expecting more from one of the top 5 strongest Kido attacks." Soifan just stood there, mouth still wide open, before she quickly collected herself. "You idiot. Did you really think I would teach you the strongest Kido attacks first? The number stands for the power of a spell, but it goes from low to high, not high to low." To make a point, Soifan shot her own Byakurai into a tree nearby, leaving a hole smaller than a baseball. "Besides, I have never in my life seen such a powerful low-level Kido spell before. If you have a talent for Kido, then I shiver when I think what you can do with higher-level Kido." Nodding dumbly, Naruto continues his training with low-level Kido spells until it was time to head home. Once back home, he cooked a quick meal with some boiled carrots, rice and chicken with herbs. Eating quickly, he soon went over to doing what he had been doing since he had been resurrected. Taking out a fine grindstone, he brought out his sword. Moving slowly but with intention, he brought his blade down on the stone and started bringing it back and forth over the fine surface. Now and then, he would take some water from a bucket and splash over the surface of the stone to make sure that any fine metal dust would be removed. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Curious as to who might be visiting, Naruto called out for them to enter. The door, opening automatically on his signal, opened to reveal Soifan standing there. Seeing that she wasn't wearing her captain's haori, he cleaned his sword and put it away. "Come in, Soifan. Would you like something to drink?" Having decided to visit Naruto to get to know him better, he was supposed to become her new vice captain after all. She had become a bit curious after she had seen what he was doing. Suddenly remembering that he had asked her a question, she quickly responded. "Some tea would be nice, thank you." Deciding to make herself comfortable, she sat down on the corner couch and waited for him to come over. Bringing 2 cups with him, he sat down opposite from her and handed her one of them. Deciding to sate her curiosity first, she asked the question that first come to mind. "So I noticed that you were sharpening your blade just now. You are aware that no matter how much you sharpen your zanpakuto, it will not be able to cut anything unless your spirit is behind the blow." Grinning and scratching the back of his head, Naruto took a sip of his tea before answering. "Well, I guess it's just a habit I have. You see, when I was alive, there was this woman that I ended up on a team with a few times. Her name was Tenten, and she was a master with all known weapons. Whenever we would camp for the night, she would always bring out some sort of weapon and then start sharpening it or cleaning it. One night, she saw that I had nothing to do, so she taught me how to maintain my own weapons. Whenever I'm alone or out doing missions, I will start doing it whenever I have some downtime." Adding a bit about this and that, Soifan soon asked another question that was on her mind. "How do you feel about being brought back to life? I mean, it's not like we could ask if you wanted to live again before you were brought back." At this question, Naruto chuckled a bit. She sure was curious about him. "I must say that I have seen enough war for a lifetime. Ever since I could run, I have been training to fight for my village. At first, my village hated me. Despised and ignored, I wanted to become strong so that people would acknowledge me. On my first real mission as a ninja, I met a girl a few years older than me. She would be the one to give me a new reason to grow stronger." Naruto took a deep breath, remembering that day when Haku died, protecting her father figure. "On that day, I stopped fighting for myself. On that day, I learned that real strength comes when you protect someone precious to you. From that day, I would train to become the strongest so I could always protect those close to me. When I died of old age, I was certain that I had done all that was in my power and that I could finally rest in peace." Letting out a bitter chuckle, he nevertheless continued with a small smile. "When I died, there was no afterlife. No hell or heaven, but only darkness. The darkness only lasted for what felt like a few moments before I woke up in that lab. From what was said back in the lab, it sounded like you would have expected me to get here after I died. It seems like Kami still has a purpose for me, and so long as I have some precious people, I will fight to protect them." Soifan, by that time, had a small tear roll from her eye. To be so brave and having fought so much in his life only to be called upon to once again fight. Quickly wiping it away, she discovered that she had unconsciously moved closer to the blonde and was almost 3/4 of the way there. Looking at a clock on the wall, she noticed that they had talked for almost 3 hours straight. Quickly standing up and excusing herself, she began to move towards the door. "I had fun tonight, Soifan. My door is always open if you want to talk some more." Nodding, she left without turning around, hiding a slight blush on her cheeks. "Damn. Those blue eyes. I could easily get lost in them." His voice, so calm. And that smile. A smile that could light up even the darkest room. If only he wasn't married. Going to bed, Kurama suddenly spoke to him. "You know, Kit, even after you die, you still manage to find them." "I know, but it's not like it's my fault. I only hope that my wives will let me live when they find out." "Don't worry, Kit. We got your back." "It's not the back I'm worried about, Kurama. It's the front." Hearing the deep laughter of the great demon fox, Naruto decides to go to sleep, dreaming about his 2 wives chasing him with sharp objects. The next day, Naruto could be found sparring in hand-to-hand combat with the masked stealth force. Since this was just to learn the style, as well as getting back into fighting unarmed, it was set to light contact only. Having fought for almost half an hour straight, Naruto had built up a small sweat. Suddenly, his opponent stopped and bowed to someone behind him. Naruto turned to greet the visitors. Before him stood a giant of a man. Reaching 290 meters and wearing a bulky bucket helmet with horizontal slits for his eyes. He has the captain's cloak with the number 7 on it. On his shoulders are metal weight pads. His arms are covered in gloves with metal plate on the top, and his boots are also covered in plate iron. At his side is a man with black hair that is cut flat on the top. He wears dark shades, has a small mustache and an open Shinigami uniform. On his arm is the badge of the vice captain of the 7th Division. Naruto thought he looked a bit like some fancy thug. Naruto doesn't know what Yakuza are, since they would appear in the time after he was dead. Greetings. I am 7th Division Captain Sajin Kamamura, and this is my vice captain, Tetsuzumi Iba. Finding the armor a bit odd, Naruto nevertheless bows and gives his own polite greeting. It is an honor to meet you. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I am the apprentice of Captain Soifon. Yes. It is quite an honor to be apprenticed by one of the captains. As Soifon has accepted you, so did Genryusai-sama accept me when I first joined the Shinigami Academy, but enough about that. My reason for coming here is that I heard you accepted a spar with Kenpachi Zaraki. I too would like to test you if you will allow me. Naruto wasn't very surprised that he was challenged again. He was, however, wondering about the helmet and he was a bit wary about all the plate metal. Since he wasn't able to use his chakra, Naruto had no way near as much protection as all that metal would provide. I would be honored to test my skills against another captain. Would you test me in the blade as well? Giving a rough laugh, the captain responds. I have trained extensively in all forms of Shinigami combat. I'm sure Kenpachi gave you a run for your money in your fight, so I propose a fight in pure Hakuta, hand to hand. Thinking it was a bit unfair, both because of the height advantage as well as all the armor, Naruto nevertheless accepted. As both got into their stances, Sajin couldn't help but comment on his opponent's stance. Even though I don't use any formal style of combat, I have studied many of the forms, ranging from Aikido to Savate, and I have never seen your style. Rubbing the back of his head, Naruto responds with a chuckle. I can tell you that it isn't a common style. While I was still alive, only 2 other people I knew of was able to use IT3. The style died with me because my children weren't compatible with it. Preferring to either learn my wife's style or learning from one of my best friends instead. Even if they weren't able to learn it, I was still very proud of them. If you must know, it goes by the name of Kawazu Kumite or Frog Kata. Whipping a straight tear from his eye, Naruto resumed his stance. Nodding at that, they both charged forward. Naruto started with a flying kick, but the large captain sidestepped it. Not feeling deterred, Naruto quickly tried a high spin kick that was blocked by a large arm before he was pulled into a circular throw. Naruto landed on his hands before he flipped over and charged again. Seeing he was coming, Sajin let loose a powerful hammer fist. Naruto, seeing this, barely managed to jump away at the last second. And not a second too late, for where the hand impacted the ground, it left a small crater almost a foot in diameter. Being very familiar with this type of fighting, Naruto decided to minimize the risk of being hit. Since his reach was shorter, Naruto decided that his speed would have to do if he wanted to stay out of the hospital. Rushing in once again, Naruto let out a flurry of punches to the front of his opponent. Even if he blocked most of the blows with his large arms, Sajin was impressed by the speed and ferocity of the attack. Drawing back, he let loose a powerful straight left. Naruto ducked and tried a leg sweep, but was surprised when the large captain flipped over it and sent a powerful heel into the top of his head. Lying in a small crater, Naruto groaned. Man, that kick was almost as powerful as the punch my wife delivered when I forgot her birthday. Sajin, at this, was quite impressed. He had heard rumors about the fight between Naruto and Kenpachi. The rumors did say he healed fast, but the amount of power he had put into that kick would be enough to knock a vice captain out for a few hours. Walking over, he helped Naruto to his feet. That was most impressive. You withstood an attack that would take out most vice captains. I'm truly looking forward to what you can do in the future. Rubbing the back of his head, any visible wounds already healed, Naruto grinned a fox-like grin at that. Well, if we fight again, I won't be such a pushover. I plan on becoming a whole lot stronger. And why is it that you wish to become so strong, if you don't mind me asking? Oh, that's easy. When I was about 12 years old, while alive, I met this girl. She was quite beautiful, but misguided in some places. You see, she believed herself to be only the tool of her master. To be used like he wished and then thrown away if broken. She was, however, right on one thing. She believed that you could only become truly strong if you fight to protect someone precious to you. Since that time, it has been my only reason to become stronger. No matter what was thrown at me, I would always find the strength to defeat those who sought to hurt my precious people. As an afterthought, he added. Right before her master died, he did admit that he hadn't seen her as a tool in many years, but rather as his own daughter. Unfortunately, the battle that caused him his mortal wounds also caused the girl to die only minutes after her master. Whipping away a straight tear, he concluded his story. On the side, Tetsuzumi was crying manly tears, reminding Naruto of 2 people in green spandex suits. I thank you for telling me. If you find the time, I would like you to visit me at the 7th Division barracks and tell me more of your stories. It would be my honor. Perhaps you could tell me some stories as well. With that, the officers of the 7th Division left Naruto to do some more training. Over the next week, Naruto would train during the morning and day. In the evenings he would try to visit his new friends, Kane Shiba, Rukia Kichiki and Sajin Kamamura. The only distractions he got were when the captain of Division 8, Shunsui Kairaku came to visit along with his vice-captain, Nanao Ice. Naruto was glad to see that someone dared to defy the Shinigami dress code with his pink kimono with flower patterns. They ended up talking a lot, mostly about topics like women and drinking. When Naruto mentioned that he might consider continuing to write the Icha Icha books, the 8th Division captain was almost drooling. After some joyous screams, promises to fund the series, and a quick beating by Nanao, they left. The 9th Division captain, Kanam Tosen, also decided to pay a visit. However, they soon started arguing about the way Kanam looked upon justice. Naruto was all for the idea of going through the least violence, but Naruto had a feeling that Kanam was hiding some darker purpose. They parted on less than friendly terms, but it hadn't come to blows between them. Like in the elemental nations, Naruto realized that not everyone could be of equal minds, and that sometimes it was difficult to change others' view on things. Naruto, not having much else to do, would continue his training, but on this particular day, his grin could have split his face. He would finally learn how to do the Shunpo flash step. He hadn't been a slouch when it came to speed while he was alive. Rock Lee might have beaten him in a race with pure muscle power, but once Naruto started to crank up the juice, there were few who could keep up with him. The two people closest to him in speed was the 4th Raikage with his lightning cloak jutsu and the Juubi enhanced Madara Uchiha. Even without his father's jutsu, the Hiraishin flying thunder god, he was considered the fastest, so finding a way to go fast without chakra was in Naruto's mind really exciting. As they both sat down on the forest floor, Soifon explained how the Shunpo worked. She explained that it was all about how you directed spiritual pressure into your legs and that masters would use less steps and therefore less time to cover a set distance. Soifon was really enjoying teaching someone who was so dedicated to learning what she was teaching. Naruto could be a ball of energy, but when they sat down like this, he would listen intently and ask questions if it was something he didn't get right away. At the same time, she was a bit sad and had to hold back tears a few times. Seeing that Naruto was learning the Shunpo brought her back to the time she was learning it from her old master, Uruchi Shihoin. She silently vowed that she would never abandon her pupil like that. Of course, when it came time to learn it, the first thing Naruto did was run headfirst into a tree. For almost 10 full minutes, you could hear Soifon's laughter ring through the woods where they were training. It wasn't a malicious laughter, and Naruto thought it sounded pretty nice. It was the first time he had heard it, and when she had settled down, he decided that he wanted to hear it more. Learning the Shunpo soon turned into a game of cat and mouse, or in this case fox and bee. Naruto would chase after Soifon, and they would occasionally laugh whenever the other would do something unexpected. As was his habit while alive, Naruto would usually try to Shunpo between branches on some of the larger trees in the forest. The trees were nowhere close the size of those that had surrounded his home village, Konoha. Pushing off with a bit too much energy than planned, he crashed into Soifon before they ended up a tangled mess on the forest floor. Naruto had landed on his back and to brace himself, he had grabbed what was closest to him and pulled it close to his body. Soifon on the other hand, had seen what was going to happen a little too late. When she started to fall towards the ground, Naruto had grabbed her around the waist and turned around so she wouldn't get hurt. This led to her lying with her head on Naruto's chest and arms trapped by Naruto's own. She could hear his steady heartbeat and it felt very relaxing to listen to it. Realizing what position she was in, she blushed and tried to move away from the blonde ninja. Naruto was a bit dazed after the landing. Feeling a weight on his body, he soon realized that he had grabbed Soifon and held her close. It felt right to hold her so close and she blushed so prettily. Feeling that she started to squirm in his grasp, he slowly let her go. Once they were both back on their feet, they were both a bit embarrassed. Before Naruto could say anything, Soifon beat him to the punch. There was a hint of sadness in her voice and she wouldn't meet his eyes. "We really shouldn't. I know that you were married and what would your wives think when Mayuri brings them back? I'm sorry, but we should go back to a strictly professional relationship." Turning, she started to walk away. She had really enjoyed their time together, just talking and laughing. It eased the pain she felt when Uruchi had left her, and when she was with him, she could almost forget it completely. However, she had also forgotten who he was, that he wasn't free to any woman who would desire him. As she walked, unshed tears were collecting in her eyes, ready to spill at any moment. Naruto was first a bit shocked. Whenever they were talking or training, she would lighten up considerably, so it was clear that she enjoyed his company. That she would think of him first, coupled with her laugh and her cute blush whenever they were close. She would go out of her way to train him, she would answer any questions he had and help him if he needed it. Very few people in Naruto's early life had done that for him and it made him harden his resolve. Softly grabbing her arm, he held her back before slowly turning her around and looking right into her eyes. He could see the pain in them clear as day. The same pain he had seen right after he had woken up, only that now it seemed greater. He could see that her tears had started to roll down her slender face. Doing what felt natural, he pulled her close and stroked her hair softly while she wept on his chest. Not knowing her original pain, Naruto could only stand there and whisper soothing words while she let all her emotions out. When she had finally calmed down, it was already dark, but Naruto didn't mind. She had bottled up all that pain for so long, but now that she had let it all out, they could move on. Carefully lifting her face, he gently wiped away her tears with his thumb. In a caring voice, he spoke. "It looks like we both have traumatizing pasts. The difference between us is that I found people to help me deal with the pain. Let me be the one to ease your pain." She could see the sincerity and compassion in his eyes. Those deep blue eyes that she wouldn't mind drowning in. They were focusing on her with such an intensity that they almost glowed. Having been alone for almost 50 years, she suddenly felt scared. How would she be able to love someone? Did she even know what love was anymore? Weakly, she tried to argue. "But what about your other wives? Surely they will hate me for trying to steal their man away." Naruto only thought for a second before he responded. "So it might be a bit hard in the beginning. They are both reasonable people, so I'm sure they will only take it out on me and not you." As an afterthought, he added. "We all loved each other very much, so I'm sure they can forgive. However, they might decide to test you in some way. I remember when Sakura asked me if I still loved her. When I said yes, she and Hinata had an all-out battle that tore up an entire training ground before they came to an agreement. I even had to hire a few genin teams to clean up all the holes and uprooted trees." Feeling a bit nervous at that, Soifan made up her mind and steeled her features. "If that's what it takes for me to gain their acceptance, then I'll do it. However, I'm unsure how we should proceed. After being alone for so long, I don't know what couples tend to do." Naruto chuckled a bit at that. "Oh, that's easy. We will simply have to go on a date. Nothing too fancy. Just the two of us eating together. How about my place, Saturday at 17:00? That should give us both enough time to get some casual clothes and I can make us a nice dinner." Soifan was still a bit unsure. Being alone for so long had made her seek out romance novels, and they all stated that at this point they should be kissing and being madly in love. Seeing that Naruto had some experience on that particular field, she decided to just go along with it and see where it would lead them. Remembering that it had gotten late, they decided that it was time to head home. Naruto had carefully taken her small hand into his larger hand while they walked back. On the way, he would ask her what she thought about the other captains. He had gotten quite good at reading people, but he was still unsure about some of them. Having finally reached their destination, Naruto gave Soifan a quick hug before wishing her a good night. Blushing quite a bit, Soifan almost ran into her room so she could escape. Naruto just chuckled before heading towards his own room. Once inside, Naruto went through his usual ritual, which consists of a light meal, brushing his teeth, and finally going over his sword with a wet stone. Just before he was about to hit the bed, he heard an unfamiliar voice speak inside his head. "Naruto Uzumaki. It is time we spoke, and you are ready." Hell, butterfly. Naruto was sitting across from Soifan. Lecture position activated. Eyes locked on the target, ears focused. Arm ready to shoot to the sky if he had any questions. She were teaching him general stuff that every Shinigami needs to know, like what squads have what responsibility, correct conduct in the presence of a seated officer and other things. Then you place the pommel of your zanpakuto on the soul's head and he is then transported here. That's how you perform the Kanso, soul burial. Any questions? Naruto shook his head. Usually, the lectures were pretty straightforward and it did help that Soifan was pretty good at explaining stuff. He had heard a rumor that Byakuya Kichiki always used complex diagrams with bunnies. He hoped he never had to see that for the rest of his undead life. Soifan was very happy. Whenever Naruto needed to learn anything he would quickly get the concept and what he didn't get would be learned in a very short amount of time. Good. Next we have the Jigakucho, Hell Butterfly. Almost faster than the eye could track, his hand was in the air. He could still remember when he had interrupted without being given permission. It was like she had intentionally hit random spots on his body with her shikai. She hadn't even aimed at any of his vitals. Giving him the go-ahead, he asked probably the most strange question ever. Why do they call them hell butterflies? Aren't we as far away from hell as possible? Soifan sighed in frustration. He was usually the perfect student, but sometimes he would just get the weirdest ideas and had to voice them. Well, the name is probably because of the color and shape. It's basically a pitch black butterfly. Seeing that he is nodding as if understanding, she continues her lecture. The hell butterfly is often seen as a symbol of change. The 12th Division has researched them, and they have found out that the Hell Butterfly is actually a soul that is waiting to be reborn. For a Shinigami, the Hell Butterfly have many functions. A Hell Butterfly will safely guide the souls that have been cleansed by the soul burial to soul society. When you are going to the human world, a hell butterfly will guide you without having to pass through the Dangai, precipice world. The last use for it is also quite practical. For you see, the hell butterfly can take a message and deliver it to certain people. If you should make a message, you would only have to let the butterfly land on your finger, then feed it some of your spiritual pressure while thinking the exact message you want delivered, along with who you want to receive it. Simple, right? Naruto looked thoughtful, but not confused. That was a good sign. He would usually think new information over for a minute or so before he would either understand or ask questions to clarify something. So they are like message birds. Able to carry a message to different people. Only that more than one person can receive the same message. Soifan was happy that he had understood the general concept. That is correct. I brought with me a hell butterfly for you to practice with. I want you to try and send a message to me and then you will receive a message as well, just to make sure you understand it. Nodding, Naruto let out his finger so the butterfly could land on it. Once it had done that, Naruto's face displayed concentration before a massive wave of spiritual pressure was released. It only took 5 seconds before almost 100 hell butterflies swarmed Naruto. They both laughed after that. Naruto out of embarrassment and Soifan because she had never seen something like that happen in all her years as a Shinigami. After all but the one hell butterfly had been showed away, Naruto tried again. Letting out only a barely noticeable amount of spiritual pressure. Soifan let out her finger so the butterfly could land on her finger. Once it did, she fed it some of her own spiritual pressure to hear the message. 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing. Is this thing on? Damn, it's hard to focus while doing this, hey Naruto. I know it's a bad time, but what do you think about Soifan? I bet you could do a lot of fun things with her petite body. Shut up Kurama. It's hard enough to concentrate if I don't have to think about her sexy body. Damn. Did it record that as well? Soifan could only blush bright red before she promptly fainted. Chapter 4. Regret and Revelations. Naruto Uzumaki. It is time we spoke and you are ready to know my name. Naruto was at first a bit worried, however the voice didn't sound malicious or evil. Naruto was naturally very curious to new things, so the sooner he could find out who that voice belonged to, the better. As he sat down on his bed, he sent a look towards his zanpakuto. Soifan did mention that his zanpakuto would tell him its name, so he would guess that the voice he heard belonged to his sword. Taking a deep breath, he went into the lotus position so he could access his mind more easily. 1st Division Barracks. The captain commander sat behind his desk, reading some status reports from his other captains. His eyes were sharp, but his mind wasn't focused on the task at hand. He didn't like to admit it, but he had made many mistakes in his long career as captain commander. Among those were the individual training that the members of the different squads received. He was also regretful that there was so much infighting between the different squads. His second biggest regret was how he had handled the situation, almost 50 years ago, that led to the exile of 11 high-ranking officers. His biggest regret was made quite recently, and it was this mistake that gnawed both his heart and soul. This biggest mistake could perhaps have been avoided altogether, but that would require that he reverse time to prevent some of the other mistakes he had already made. Had the Shinigami at his disposal received the proper training, then perhaps they wouldn't have needed to find help from outside. At this he shook his head violently. He would not become so arrogant that he would refuse help just to save his pride. He had been so arrogant once and it had almost cost him everything. Going back to the reports, he could read from almost all of them that one Naruto Uzumaki was growing stronger by the day. If that wasn't scary enough in itself, he had mentioned that his other power source had been sealed away. What would happen when he unsealed it? How strong would he become? Even with all that power, without realizing it, Naruto Uzumaki had accepted a huge responsibility by agreeing to help them. Or perhaps he had realized it, but still accepted because he felt that he would be the only one to handle it. Coming to a decision, the captain commander decided that he would explain the real reason why they had chosen to resurrect him. Inside Naruto's mind, like always, Naruto would materialize in the center of the yin-yang seal that made up the floor. This was the deepest level of his mind, where the tailed beasts could all gather and talk together. After he had gotten the other tailed beasts, he had removed the sower from his mind and replaced it with several levels, one unique for each tailed beast. The tailed beasts could still talk with each other, but they would be unable to talk face to face unless they gathered in this, the deepest level. As always, the tailed beasts were waiting for him. They showed no discomfort or anger, but they would often shoot curious glances towards a small person that stood to the side. She looked like a child no older than 10 years, and she wore what looked like a white nightgown with frills at the hem and had blonde spiky hair that fell down to her lower back. She was standing with her right side towards him, and it looked like she was playing with a ball connected to a piece of string. Walking towards her, he suddenly realized two things. The first was that the left side of her face was completely covered by blonde bangs. She had a nicely shaped face, a happy smile, and sparkly ocean blue eyes. The second was that what he had mistaken for a ball was in fact a large yo-yo. It was roughly the size of a coconut with orange and blue stripes along the edge. In the middle, on the side facing him was what looked like a red Uzumaki spiral. He had learned that it was in fact his family crest while he was traveling around with Uraya. When he had gotten within 3 meters of her, she suddenly spoke in a happy and excited voice. "Hello Naruto Uzumaki. I'm so glad we can finally meet. I'm really happy that you were able to hear my voice. You know that some people either can't hear it or they chose to ignore it, but you did neither. By the way you care for me every night, I'm sure we will be the best of friends." Naruto wasn't quite sure what to say. He had no experience with sentient weapons while he was alive. Except for at the receiving end of Samehada a bit awkwardly he spoke. I'm glad to meet you too. I always try to take good care of my weapons, but I have a feeling that you are way more than just a simple sword. Soifan spoke something about the zanpakuto being a manifestation of my spirit. If that were true, then it would mean that I'm a part of you, and you are a part of me. I figured that if I take care of you, then you will take care of me. Like if he was encouraged, he gained more confidence as he spoke. By the end, it felt like they had known each other all their lives. Suddenly, there was a change. The bangs that were framing the left side of her face had now moved to cover the right side. Instead of the sparkling ocean blue eye he had been expecting, there stared a deep crimson eye towards him, and her mouth was a thin line. This put Naruto slightly on guard, although he didn't sense anything sinister from her. In a serious but calm tone, she suddenly spoke. "You have nothing to fear from me. I am merely the other personality of your spirit. Where my counterpart is always cheerful and excited, I will remain serious and calm. We are a reflection of you. Where you are normally smiling and goofing around, you can turn serious at the blink of an eye if necessary. This will also show whenever you release your Shikai. However, in order for you to achieve your Shikai, you will have to fight me." Suddenly, the yo-yo disappeared and a sword similar to the one strapped to Naruto's hip materialized in her left hand. Naruto realized that there would be time to talk later, unsheathed his own sword. As they both stood in a ready position, Naruto pondered how he should do this. He knew enough about himself that it would be foolish to underestimate his opponent even if he was almost a foot taller than she was. Before he could decide on a strategy, her hair suddenly changed back to the ocean blue eye. She moved the sword to her right hand before suddenly exclaiming in a happy voice. "I hope you are ready, because I want to play." Slightly taken aback by the sudden shift, Naruto wasn't prepared when she suddenly shot forward at a speed he thought unlikely for someone her size. She jumped up and spun horizontally before delivering a downward strike. Naruto was barely able to put up a block in time to deflect the blow. Trying to go for a counter-attack, Naruto sent away a horizontal cut, but the short girl just spun back and started to giggle. "That was fun. I hope we can play lots more." She suddenly started spinning with her sword extended to the side. Almost like a top, she charged him, and he could only block the rapid spinning attacks. After blocking almost a dozen slashes, he jumped back to get some space. Suddenly, she stopped spinning and fell to the ground holding her head. The world is spinning so dizzy. Slowly walking forward, Naruto was completely unprepared when she suddenly rolled back before lunging at him. A thin gash formed on his chin before blood slowly began to drip from the wound. Standing with her back turned, she now stood a bit straighter and she had the sword in her left hand. Naruto had been caught flat-footed. If she were able to change like that in the middle of battle, it could throw him off his game. She truly was a dangerous opponent. There is a time for games, but that time is not now. Now it's my turn. Charging towards him, she sent a flurry of strikes and stabs that were all meant to do serious harm. Naruto had no time to counterattack because he had to block, parry or dodge if he wanted to walk away from this fight in one piece. He had several small lacerations all over his body and he was breathing hard. She was pushing him to his limits and there was only so much he could do to stay one step ahead. Suddenly, she jumped back about 20 feet. Naruto was once again wary because she could swiftly lunge for him or perhaps she would change back to her other personality. She did neither. She stood completely still and suddenly spoke in a quiet voice. "You have done well to survive for so long, but now you have to make a choice." From out of nowhere, two figures materialized before him. He only needed one glance to know who they were because he had been with them for a lifetime. All the fight drained from his body when he saw them. They were both dressed in the ninja gear that they had used in the Fourth Great Shinobi War. Hinata had two shoulder-length bangs framing her face and the rest of her hair going down to her lower back. Sakura had her hair only to shoulder length, splitting in the front to frame her face. They both wore the standard Chunin flak jacket and deep blue pants and long-sleeved shirts. They were both on their knees with arms and legs bound behind their backs. They were both gagged and when they saw him, tears started to form in their eyes. His heart was breaking when he looked at them. So helpless before him. He wanted nothing more than to run over to them. To free them, hug them and kiss them. Telling them that it would be alright. He felt dread welling up inside him when his opponent put her sword to their throats, ready to spill their blood should he make one wrong move. Suddenly she spoke in a more sinister voice. "This is the end of the line. Their lives are in my hand, as is yours. If you wish for them to live, you must plunge your blade into your stomach. The choice is yours, your life in exchange for theirs." To add emphasis to her words, she gave them both a shallow cut on their throat, letting a small bit of blood run down their necks. At this point they started to whimper, tears streaming down their faces. Naruto stood there frozen for only a second. Having realized a long time ago that his life had no meaning if he didn't have anyone to share it with, there was only one option open to him. With not one word, he turned the sword in his hands and raised it up. To save those he loved, he would be willing to die 100 times if necessary. Seeing what he was about to do, his two wives gave muffled screams, but to no avail. Naruto thrust his blade into his stomach before falling to his knees. He looked down and saw blood flow from his wound. Except for the initial shock when the blade had entered his flesh, there was no pain. Looking up, he saw that his wives were fading away and the little girl came running towards him. He could see tears streaming from her ocean blue eye before she flung herself onto him and hugged him fiercely. In a tear-filled and regretting voice she spoke. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." She cried for what felt like hours before she finally calmed down enough and carefully removed the sword that was still embedded in his stomach. The stomach wound along with the other cuts he had received disappeared as if he had never sustained them at all. In a calmer, but still sad voice, she spoke to him. "I'm sorry for what we did, but it had to be done. It was breaking our hearts to threaten our precious people, but we had to be sure. Your zanpakuto is very special, Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto managed to stay focused even though he was physically as well as mentally exhausted, because this would be important. He didn't like the way they had tested him, but he assumed that they had a good reason for it. In a soft and caring voice, he asked the obvious question. "Special in what way? I thought all zanpakuto were different. What would separate my zanpakuto from others?" She chuckled brightly at that, before the bangs covered her blue eye. The deep crimson eye was a bit puffy, and there were lines down her face that indicated that she too had cried. Her voice was a bit subdued, but still had an air of seriousness about it as she spoke. "I'm sorry too. It hurt me deeply to be the one who had to inflict any damage to our precious people. However, it had to be done in order to see if you still kept your noble spirit and unwavering heart. You are an amazing person, Naruto Uzumaki, always willing to put others before yourself. It is because of this that your zanpakuto has been blessed with an amazing ability. After this conversation, you will receive this ability along with how to activate your shikai, should you ever need it." Taking a deep breath, she continued. "In life, you would always protect those precious to you. Your zanpakuto will therefore be unable to harm those of pure heart and soul. We, your zanpakuto spirit, have given you this ability because we fear what would happen to both you and your precious people when you unleash your full power." Stopping, as if being reminded about something, she starts talking again. "We will help you in mastering your shikai, but we can only do so much. There are certain techniques that we will teach you, but to master it, you will have to train relentlessly." Naruto sat there dumbstruck. Suddenly, he hugged her tightly and started laughing. He felt so happy that he cried a few tears of joy. Since the moment he had learned that he was the Jinchuriki, he had been wary of all the power he contained. How easy it would have been to just unleash it all, let go of himself and drown in all that power. Through the years, he had lost control only a few times, but it was always a great rush to receive all that power. At some point he even started to fear it, fear what it could do not just to him, but to those close to him as well. Slowly, he had been able to tame that massive power by befriending the source. He and Kurama had become friends, and after that they started to watch each other's backs. Still, he had to be careful. With all that power at his disposal, he would only need to slip up once to hurt or possibly kill someone close to him. Now that had changed. Thanks to Kami, a great burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He would no longer have to fear accidents where his friends and precious people were hurt because of him. Feeling incredibly tired, he let go of his zanpakuto spirit and just smiled. It was a truly happy smile, and it felt like the room got just a bit brighter because of it. Seeing that he was exhausted, the zanpakuto spirit began to fade away along with the room. "Remember that I will always be with you should you need me. Should you require my assistance in battle, just call my name. Come to think of it, I haven't introduced myself yet, Naruto Uzumaki. My name is Raisin JM, Spiral." With that, Naruto opened his eyes and saw that he was still sitting in the lotus position on his bed. Feeling tired beyond belief, he quickly undressed and went to sleep. Dreaming about how he and his zanpakuto spirit would protect everyone. Inside Naruto's mind, a figure walked out of the shadows. He had long blonde hair set in a spiky ponytail and 3 black lines on each cheek. He had blood-red eyes that were staring at the 9-tailed beasts. Kurama, who had been with Naruto the longest, knew who it was. "So I see that you are back. It's been nearly 60 years since I saw you the last time." The figure gave a short laugh at that. A malicious laugh that sent shivers down the spines of those who listened to it. The other tailed beasts pulled back a bit since it was clear that the figure had its sole focus on the great fox. He might have defeated me the last time, but as you know, I can never truly disappear. Fear not, for it is still too soon for my plans to be set in motion. And this time, I plan on taking full control. But that, the figure fused back with the shadows, erasing all physical evidence that he had been there. Kurama gave a meaningful glance to each of the other tailed beasts. There truly wasn't a dull moment with Naruto around. The next morning, Naruto woke up feeling relaxed despite having been thoroughly exhausted the previous night. He felt more at peace after all that was said last night. He went to the bathroom for a quick shower before he started to make breakfast. As he slowly ate, he thought about the clothes he should wear for his date with Soifon. He had mentioned that they should dress casually, and his mind went to the first date he had with Hinata. Flashback. Kakashi stood before his student, looking him over. After the war had ended, he had realized how little he had done for his old team. When Naruto had asked him and Iruka about advice for how he should dress for his date, Kakashi had seen this as an opportunity to show that he wanted to change. Had it been before the war, Kakashi would have invented some excuse so he wouldn't have to show up, but this time he had even been on time. Everyone who had been nearby had started searching the sky to see if Shizune's pet pig, Tauntaun, had learned to fly. Not finding Tauntaun in the sky, they decided that it was a high-powered Jinjutsu and just went on with their business like nothing had happened. Being terrible at Jinjutsu didn't stop Naruto from trying to dispel the supposed Jinjutsu. And this led to almost the entire shinobi population had started screamed for him to stop blasting his chakra around. Realizing that he had been a terrible person and teacher, Kakashi picked out clothes with a vigor only seen in Guy and Rock Lee previously. With the help from Iruka, they managed to pick out a few outfits for Naruto. Naruto was a bit sad that his outfits had so little orange, but realized that he didn't need to be completely covered in it to honor his parents. Even after he had become a ninja, it felt right to wear orange. He couldn't explain it until after he had met both his parents inside his seal. When he had seen them both, something clicked in his mind and he had realized why it was so important to wear orange. It had been a subconscious when he was younger, but now he knew the reason why he had to wear orange. It was a mix of red and yellow. His current outfit consisted of a white short-sleeved button-up shirt with a Uzumaki spiral over his heart. Over that he wore an open black jacket that had the sleeves folded up to show off his sleek yet muscular arms. His pants were black with 3 orange stripes going diagonally down each leg. The stripes looked like claw marks and added to his feral look. As Kakashi looked him over, he was again reminded of how much Naruto resembled his father. He had the same facial structure as his mother, but the hair and those deep blue eyes couldn't be mistaken. Kakashi felt a pang of guilt for overlooking this in his earlier days as a genin sensei. How strong could his team have become if he had trained them seriously? He had truly failed, but it looked like both Kami-sama and Naruto were willing to give him a second chance. Giving his famous eye smile, he gave the thumbs up to indicate that he was satisfied. Meanwhile, Naruto had been in his own world. He knew that Hinata was always terribly shy around him. She had admitted to him that she had been watching him from the shadows for many years, but never had the courage to approach him. As they became genin, her shell had started to crack more and more. During the pain invasion, she had admitted that she had loved him for a long time. He had been unable to respond to it at the time because he needed to become stronger if he wanted to protect everyone from the coming war. During said war, she had mustered up the courage to kiss him. This action had fueled his desire to make swift work of the war. He had shown the needed resolve and earned the trust of the other tailed beasts, allowing him to absorb their power. With their power, along with the other Rookie 11, Kakashi and Guy, they had managed to defeat the enemy and claim victory. It was ironic how he could stare down the strongest of enemies, fighting a battle where the outcome might be the destruction of the human race without a fear in the world. But when it comes to a simple date with a beautiful woman, his nerves were in tatters. Returning to reality, he saw that Kakashi was giving his patented eye smile and thumbs up while Iruka was nodding his agreement. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out to meet his date, forgetting to pay for his outfit in the process. Flashback end. As he finished his breakfast, Naruto was really excited. Not only because of the upcoming date, but also because he couldn't wait to train with his new Shikai. Having learned about it only last night, he hadn't had the time to summon it yet. No one had seen it yet, so he would make it a surprise during his Zanjutsu training with Soifon later. But before that, he had to do his regular workout. Talking about his regular workout in the beginning, the vice captain had arrogantly stated that Naruto was no good. He had been surprised the first time Naruto had completed the regular workout without complaint. He had increased the workout, hoping to make the commoner drop out. This had just made Naruto work harder until the vice captain would turn to his newest tactic. Instead of trying to put him down or even increase his training, the vice captain had simply turned his back on him and started lazing in the shadow of a nearby tree. He was frustrated that this commoner seemed to grow stronger each day. It wasn't that he was afraid for his position, he was from a rich noble family after all. It was the fact that he didn't believe this commoner had anything to do in the second squad at all. Nothing he did would drive home that Naruto didn't belong here. He was just short of tampering with his training, but his captain would give him the ass-kicking of his life if he did. With a small sigh, Naruto prepared for his workout. The vice captain could easily become twice as strong if he just took training seriously. However, similarly to a certain Hyuga branch member, he believed that being from a rich and powerful family made you superior to everyone else. Well, Naruto had given him a good beating, and that had snapped him out of it. Perhaps he should beat some sense into his vice captain as well. However, it was still too early to show his power. People would get suspicious if he were to advance in the ranks too quickly. He could chalk some of it to being trained personally by one of the captains, but that only went so far. He would have to hold back if he didn't want most of the captain's attention focused on him. He would also have to make the eventual match for vice captain look like a close race. Having decided on a light workout today, Naruto finished with some time to spare before his zanjutsu training would start. Deciding to take a quick shower, he had to hurry if he wanted to get all the shopping done. There would be no time after training, and he wouldn't mess up the state if he could help it. Since Naruto was a Shinigami apprentice, he had been allowed to do his own shopping if he ever needed it. He had never seen them, but the fridge would always restock itself each morning, so he guessed someone had the job of restocking basic food wares. Should he want something special or more exotic, he would have to buy it himself, hence why he was heading toward the Rukongai districts. Naruto had been to the upper Rukongai districts a few times already. They were numbered into sections of the 4 directions of the compass. Each of the 4 sections had 80 districts, where the number indicated how close they are to the Sirte. Naruto had noted that the lower number districts looked very much like the clan district in Konoha. These districts held wealthy people and specialized wealthy businesses, as well as some of the prominent clans that Soul Society had. Naruto would guess that the higher the number, the more slum-like the district would look. Naruto, having lived at the border of the slum himself, was able to take an educated guess as to what happened in the higher numbered districts. Naruto put that out of his mind for now. There were shops inside the Sirte, but he had asked around, and most people would recommend going to the 10th district. The reason for this was that the 10th district was a grand market district. Because of the proximity to Sirte, the prices were bordering to the higher range, but you were always guaranteed a high quality on your products, which was why so many had recommended it. Feeling both excited and a bit guilty, Naruto was marching towards the 10th district with purpose. Excited because he was truly looking forward to the date. Sure, he had many girls trying to get a piece of his heart for themselves, but as with Sakura and Hinata, he greatly enjoyed the time he spent with Soifon. When she had opened up to him in the forest, it had felt right to hold her, to soothe her worries and pain. He had learned what love was a long time ago, and what he was beginning to feel after all the training and spending time with Soifon was all leading strongly in that direction. He would not deny his feelings, however this led to why he felt a bit guilty. Naruto, after the war, had been recognized as a new clan head. Although neither of his parents had been clan heads before him, his mother had come from a prominent clan from the island nation of Yuzugakure, located at the eastern coast of Fire Country. Although Naruto had learned that Nagato, or Pain as he called himself, was in Uzumaki as well, the clan was supposed to be extinct except for himself. He had been a bit saddened when he discovered this, but had vowed that he would try to revive the clan. As he had been recognized as a clan head, he was asked to take multiple wives, which was the reason why he had been allowed to marry both Hinata and Sakura. It hadn't been easy, as there was a lot of friction in the beginning. Thankfully, Naruto had a big heart, so he was able to love them both equally. This, along with both his wives knowing and accepting each other, had helped them start a stable family together. On several occasions, they had all entertained the idea of more wives to help expand the clan. After many heated discussions on the topic, they had managed to agree on a few conditions should someone else wish to marry Naruto. The first was that, given Naruto's ability to read people, he must be able to love the person. They all figured that they didn't want some loveless marriage. The second was that the other wives would have to approve of the potential newcomer. This was to make sure there would be no infighting between the girls. How this was done was left to the individual wife, however it could easily end in a life or death situation. The reason Naruto was guilty was that, at the pace they were moving in the relationship, there was a chance that his other wives wouldn't be resurrected in time before their relationship went to the next level. His wives had at the few occasions that a new potential wife was introduced, tested her after less than 2 months after the first date. Since Naruto had a certain flair for changing the way people viewed him, his wives had deemed this as the changing point where a potential partner would either pass or fail, the standard set to be one of his wives. So engrossed in his thoughts, Naruto almost failed to notice that he had walked past the clothing store where he had planned to buy his outfit for tonight. He had opted to buy his clothes first, so the food wouldn't spoil before he had the time to put it in his fridge. Turning on his heel, he walked back and entered the shop. The bell rang as he opened the door, signaling to the owner that he had a costumer. Naruto wouldn't have time to get something custom made, so his eyes swept over the inventory. Taking in the store, he took note of an older man with gray hair standing behind a beautifully carved oaken desk. The old man stood at about 5'10" and had on a brown kimono that highlighted his emerald green eyes. When he saw Naruto come in, he bowed before introducing himself. "Greetings, young man. My name is Takashi, and I'm the owner of Takashi Clothing Shop1. If you see anything you like, you can try it out in the changing rooms in the back. If you want something custom made, you can come talk to me, however depending on what it is it might take a while to make." Had Naruto been his 12-year-old self, he wouldn't have known how to take it if a shopkeeper had been so nice to him. Having been thrown out of most shops before he had finally become a ninja. However, he had gained a reputation after the war, which had made the people go out of their way to try to be nice to him. He was happy that he was treated like a human being and that the clerk was doing his job in such a professional manner, so he returned the bow before introducing himself. "Hello. My name is Naruto Uzumaki and I would be happy to check out your wares. I need some casual clothes for a date this evening and perhaps when that is done, we can talk about a custom order I want to place." Waving his hand, indicating where he should look, Takashi replied. "I have quite the selection, so you should find what you are looking for among that section. When you are ready, just ring the bell on my desk and I'll be back." With a nod, Naruto went over to the rows with clothes. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see that Takashi was walking through a door behind the desk, probably leading to a back room. Already having an idea of what he wanted, Naruto soon found what he was looking for. Picking out a black leather jacket with a zipper running down the right side, a tight white button-up shirt with orange swirls on his left side, and some black slack pants with 2 red stripes going diagonally on each leg. He went into the changing room to make sure they were all the right size before he went and rung the bell. Not half a minute later, Takashi was back and adding the price for the items. Naruto had been given a bit of cash should he need it, but he would soon have to start doing missions to earn more. He counted out the money and handed it to Takashi before he broached the subject of some specially made clothes. "Would it be possible to make me a leather cloak with arms and a hood? It would need to be a bit loose for easy mobility, and I would prefer if the color was a burnt orange with 9 black swirls on the back forming a square." Giving a few moments to think, Takeshi soon replied. "Seeing as you are a Shinigami, I would guess that you want this cloak made so it could withstand combat, am I right?" Receiving a nod, he continued. "I'm afraid I don't specialize in that type of clothing, but luckily I know an exceptional leather worker here in the 10th district that could probably make it for you. She lives at the very edge of the district, but just ask for Yuzuki and you should be able to get directions." Giving a nod in satisfaction, Naruto left with some parting words. "Thanks a lot. I'll be sure to buy my clothes here from now on." Seeing that he had little time left, he hurried further into the district in search of some fresh food for the date. As Naruto was heading back to the barracks, he contemplated his situation. As a ninja, deception was one of the most important aspects of your life. A ninja who excelled in deception would often live longer than someone who only relied on power alone. Since Naruto had awakened, he had been putting up his best act to be polite and pleasant to everyone he met. This was both to protect himself and to hide his true feelings. As his fight with both Kenpachi and Sajin had shown him, he was still lacking greatly in strength, so he had to be careful to not step on the toes of anyone important. They could easily kill him if they saw him as an enemy, so he would tread carefully for the time being. They said he was resurrected to help fight Hollows, but somehow, Naruto felt that the truth was so much more. They would probably watch out for him, which was probably why he had been placed so close to the stealth force. He would play his cards close to his vest, but at the same time would he not deny anything that was given to him. He had suspected that Soifan might be a spy, meant to get close to him. He couldn't be sure because he knew nothing of her, but he would still go out of his way for her. His feelings for her were real enough, and he could only hope that if it had been an assignment on her part, that he could help her enjoy it. He didn't trust the other captains either. It did seem suspicious that so many of them would go out of their way to check up on him. However, he would do nothing unless they gave him a reason to do so. He greatly appreciated the time he had spent so far with Sajin and Kane after all. Shaking his head to get rid of such thoughts, Naruto quickly made his way back before putting his groceries away. Having put the food in the fridge, he quickly left to start his zanjutsu training for the day. Boy, was Soifan going to be surprised. As Soifan waited for him, she noticed that he had an extra spring in his steps as he walked up to her. She supposed he might just be excited about their upcoming date. When she thought about it, she was excited too, however she hid it well behind her professional mask. She noticed his eyes. They held something more than the usual happiness that they usually held when they were training. She felt a slight shiver go down her spine as she hoped he would tell her what it was. She had the natural curiosity of a cat, which she attributed to having Yoruichi as a sensei. As he came up to her, he eyed her sword for a second before he set his face into a foxy grin before they both took their respective stances. Soifan had drawn only a few inches of her blade while keeping her knees slightly bent in preparations for kicking off swiftly. Naruto held his blade in a two-hand grip, pointing towards Soifan, his stance with his left side towards his opponent, knees bent and sword raised up to almost ILEVEL. Check out Kill Bill during the massive fight with the Mad 88. Without a word spoken, they both dashed forward and met in a shower of sparks, blades locked in a stalemate above their heads. Seeing that trying to overpower her would be futile, Naruto leapt back before charging in from the side. As he went, he ran in an arc, closing in on his opponent. When he got close, he twisted with his blade held out at hip level, sending a horizontal slash at her stomach. Having great experience, Soifan expertly diverted the blade from making contact with her flesh. Not feeling deterred in the slightest, Naruto spun in midair while sending a vertical slash, almost like a buzzsaw towards the woman's head. She rolled back, seeing as the attack would be strengthened by both gravity and centrifugal forces. She took note that she had never seen this type of attack pattern from the blonde before. Deciding to taunt him a bit, she let out a bark of laugh. Ha! Is that all the great Naruto Uzumaki can do? I was seriously expecting more from you. Naruto stopped at this, his bangs covering his face so she couldn't see it. Speaking in a low, but clearly amused voice, he replied. Be careful what you wish for. You might just get it. She was a bit anxious now. Excited what he might do, yet there was a bit of foreboding in his voice. She shivered slightly as she felt his spiritual pressure rise. She heard him speak in a low, yet happy tone. Come out and play. Race in JM. He was suddenly engulfed in smoke before you could hear coughing. Cough, damn, cough, I wasn't expecting this even if it was my first time activating it. As the smoke cleared, Soifan could only stare in amazement at Naruto's Shikai. Hanging from Naruto's right hand was a thin, silver rope that connected to a spinning orb, about the size of an orange at the end. Soifan noted that it was blue and orange striped with a red spiral, almost like a whirlpool on the sides. Looking at it was quite mesmerizing, however she managed to move her eyes up to the huge grin that was on the blonde's face. With great pride in his voice, he suddenly exclaimed. So, what do you think? My zanpakuto spirit and I had a talk last night after I got back home. She is actually pretty nice to be around, although she can be a bit temperamental at times. This is the first time I have seen my Shikai, so I'm not really sure what to do now. He ended a bit lamely. Clearly as surprised as she was about his own Shikai. Suddenly, the ball moved upward before Naruto by pure reflex caught the ball in his right hand. Suddenly, realization dawned on Soifan before she spoke. Your Shikai is a yo-yo. You truly are an intriguing person, Naruto. Naruto took a pondering look. He had never owned any toys while he grew up. When Soifan had mentioned a yo-yo, his mind took him back to when he had seen some kids play in a park back in Konoha. Two of them had a small spinning object connected to a thin rope. He could remember how they had done some impressive twirls with them. All the other kids had seemed amazed at the performance, their eyes glued to the small spinning devices. As he went down memory lane, he absent-mindedly let go of the yo-yo and it fell down before starting to spin again. Soifan could again feel her eyes being drawn toward the yo-yo as it spun lazily. Naruto suddenly felt a nudge inside his head. It felt different from Kurama and the other tailed beasts, so he assumed it was his zanpakuto spirit. As if to confirm this, he got a mental image of the spirit lazily swinging the yo-yo around. Absently, he started to swing the yo-yo back and forth before it spun the entire length of the line in a clockwise direction at his right side. Suddenly, the yo-yo rolled back up to his hand and Naruto was left with a face-splitting grin. Soifan couldn't help but give a small smile in return. His good mood was infectious. They both knew that he would need some time to adapt to his Shikai. That was why Soifan put her sword back in its scabbard. Seeing that Soifan had disengaged, Naruto attempted some more spins to try to get a feel for how the yo-yo would move. As Naruto was experimenting with his new Shikai, Soifan went over to take a closer look at it. As the yo-yo once again rested in his palm, she could spot slits along the rotating axis. She was guessing that it would open up to reveal an attack in the future. As Naruto was remembering how the kids had played back when he was younger, he tried some of the tricks he had seen them do. He let the yo-yo spin along the ground before returning it to his hand. Feeling a bit bolder, he flung the yo-yo from his hand and to his amazement, the silvery rope extended to almost twice its length before it returned to his hand, never hitting the ground. Looking intently to his Shikai, he couldn't keep the wonder from his voice. You're just full of surprises, aren't you? As if to answer that, he could swear that he heard a girlish giggle from inside his mind. Feeling emboldened by that, Naruto decided to test something out. He let go of the yo-yo so it would spin at a sedated pace. Then he tried to focus on the yo-yo, willing it to go faster. Furrowing his brow in concentration, he could see that the yo-yo was picking up speed. Letting it drop to the ground while spinning much faster than previously, Naruto was unprepared when the yo-yo suddenly gained traction and shot forward at a fast pace. This time, the rope extended slightly longer than when he had thrown it before it came back to his hand with a loud smacking noise. Looking down at the ground, there was a small furrow where the yo-yo had gained traction. Looking at the sky, he saw that the Zanjutsu training was coming to an end, so he sealed his Shikai back to its sword form. Once done, they took a quick break before starting the Kido training. He dimly noted that he was slowly getting tired from all the use of spiritual pressure. While he was usually brimming with energy, he wondered if this was how normal people usually felt. After he had trained some in Kido, they took a short break before continuing to practice Shunpo. This ended up as another game of tag before they both walked back to the barracks. Once Naruto was back, he took a quick shower, careful to wash his body and hair to get the dirt from his game of tag away. As he finished the shower, he dried off with a towel before looking in the mirror. Looking back at him was the ever-youthful face he had kept even after almost 70 years. During his lifetime, he had gained some lines and wrinkles to his face, but now he looked like he had when he was in his early 20s. He had a slightly round face with a chiseled jaw. On his cheeks were the whisker-like marks that even his kids had inherited, although his kids' lines were not as clear as his own were. Without his usually present headband, he had to move the hair slightly to show his clear azure eyes. Looking up, he noted that his hair was as unruly as usual. 2 chin-long bangs framed his face, while the rest was a spiky mess. The hair on top of his head would stand in all directions, while in the back it went down in a spiky curtain down to his shoulders. He kept his hair this way for 2 simple reasons. The first was because his 2 girls seemed to like it and he would be hard-pressed to deny them anything. The second was in honor of his old teacher, Jiraiya. Even if he had called him an old pervert on numerous occasions, it had still affected him immensely when the old sage had died while fighting the bodies of Nagato. After his godfather had died, as Naruto was his apprentice, he had been given most of Jiraiya's possessions. This included any jutsu he had created, as well as the rights for his perverted books, the Icha Icha series. Among his possessions had been a letter addressed for Tsunade. He hadn't known the content, but when she had read it, she promptly burst into tears. It took many hours and the combined effort of him, Shizune and Sakura, to help calm her down after that. Snapping out of his daydreaming, Naruto sent a quick glance down his body. He didn't have bulky muscles as the Raikage, or was as chiseled as Gaia Rock Lee, but he did have sleek and hard muscles. Naruto noted that he should probably begin training with weights again, so as to help increase his speed. Stepping out of the bathroom, he put on the white shirt and the black pants that he had bought earlier that day. Putting on an apron over his shirt, he went over to the kitchen to start cooking for the evening date. He would always have a love for ramen, but living with his 2 wives had given him a great appreciation for a home-cooked meal. As he chopped up the vegetables, he hummed a peaceful tune. It was a tune he had first heard from Kurama a few days after the war was over. After some prodding and questions, Kurama had admitted that the Sage of 6 Paths used to hum that very tune when he felt at peace, so Naruto had taken it upon himself to continue that tradition. When his wives had heard him one day, they had both adopted the tune and had started singing it for their children as well. He had set a pot on the stove and the content was now bubbling slowly, indicating that it was boiling. He put the vegetables along with some fish he had cut into the pot and turned it before putting a lid on it. As he left the pot to boil, he started to set the table. He had some time to spare, so he set the rice to cook before he started folding the napkins. He had started origami to try to impress his future children and as a small hobby. He could make many types of animal figures and his wives thought they were cute. He had never tried to fold a bee before, mostly because bees were rarely considered decorative. After some thought, he had the greatest idea. He quickly finished his folding before going over to check on the food. Tasting it to see if it needed any more spices, Naruto nodded in satisfaction. Outside Naruto's apartment, Soifan was just outside his door. After training she had went to her room and taken a long shower, trying to calm her nerves. She had been impressed when Naruto had shown her his Shikai. Not even a prodigy like Jin or Toshiro had managed to manifest a Shikai in such a short time. The reason for her fried nerves was the fact that later today she would be on her very first date. Her early years had been spent training to be the bodyguard for the head of the Shihoin clan. Every waking hour had been spent with the purpose of shaping her body and mind to be the fastest, strongest and most alert. This had led to her not having any experience with anything even close to romance. Thinking about that, she realized that the reason she felt so drawn toward Yoruichi was because she had tried to break through her shell. Not necessarily in a context related to attraction, but more along the lines of wanting her to lose her rigid mindset. She had mistaken her actions because she didn't know better. Yoruichi had taken advantage of her ignorance by constantly teasing her. Not because she was cruel or wanted to hurt her, but because she got a reaction out of it. She had always blushed brightly whenever Yuruchi had suggested something, spoken in a certain way, and with how she moved. This had led to her misplaced feelings for her sensei and had resulted in her shutting herself out ever since her sensei had left. She had hated that the one person who had acknowledged her had abandoned her. She had hated Urahara Kisuke, the captain of Squad 12 at the time, for taking her sensei away from her. And most of all, she had hated herself for not being strong enough to go with him. This led to her turn cold to the world, shut herself away and trained relentlessly. So relentlessly had she trained, hoping to surpass her sensei that she had managed to combine Hakuta and Kido. She had done this in the hope that she would be able to beat her sensei, so she would have to acknowledge her again. She had truly been misguided. She decided that she would stop looking to the past with grief, but rather try to rectify it by looking towards a brighter future. She would start today, and it began with this date. She vowed to herself that she would stop her grieving, for she had realized that Yuruchi had in fact not betrayed her, but simply done what she thought was right at the time. She decided that she would train to the best of her ability, not to hurt Urahara Kisuke, whom she had openly hated, but to apologize and show that she had realized her mistake. She decided to grow stronger, not for revenge, but to make both Yuruchi and now Naruto proud of her. Snapping out of her deep thoughts, Soifan realized that she had been standing before Naruto's apartment door for almost half an hour. She was immensely grateful that she had started early. She was both nervous and excited about this date. Nervous because she had no idea how to act or what to do. Excited because, well, she couldn't really place it, but it felt like her stomach was full of butterflies. She enjoyed spending time with him. How he would look at her with those azure eyes. How she would pay rapt attention when he would tell one of his stories. She suddenly started to blush. What would he think when he saw her? What would they do on their date? She crushed those feelings. It wouldn't do her any good if she were blushing and acting out even before the date had begun. She schooled her features, set herself in a relaxed position, and put a light smile on her face. She wouldn't admit it, but she had smiled more in these last few weeks than she had done the past 50 years. Checking a clock that was conveniently placed in the hallway, she saw that her mind had occupied her just long enough. She was right on time. Without further thought, and before the butterflies could emerge again, she knocked on the door and waited. Inside Naruto's apartment. Naruto had just finished the last preparations before he heard the knock. The food was still on the oven so it would keep warm. The table was set and he had heated water for some tea. He had decided that water would be a bit plain for the date and he didn't want to send the wrong signals by serving sake. He didn't want to rush into a relationship and he had a feeling that Soifan would appreciate him more for it. Naruto went to open the door manually. There was no point in being rude when he had a date with someone. Grasping the handle of the door. Yes, the door did have a handle, even if it was automatic. He opened the door and took in the person on the other side. He was pleasantly surprised by her outfit. She seemed to favor black, but Naruto didn't mind. She wore a sleeveless dress that hugged her body down to her hips before it fell down to a few centimeters below her knees. It covered her entire front, connected around her neck, leaving her shoulders and back bare. The dress was all black, save for what looked like white butterflies in flight down the left side. She had brought her zanpakuto with her, and it hung horizontally along her lower back, fastened by a yellow obi around her waist. She had left her hair in her usual 2 long braids with gold rings at the ends, and she had forgone any makeup. Her smile, however, wasn't her usual cocky grin, but a mixture of a serene but happy smile. Naruto was happy to note that her eyes now contained more excitement. He had seen her zone out during training a few times, and her eyes had then held loneliness and betrayal. He wasn't sure what had caused it, but he was happy for the change. Soifan was smiling. She had gotten some advice from both Ranjiku and Isane when she had mentioned that she had a date. They had both been really excited for her and had helped pick out the dress. Ranjiku had of course suggested a dress that would have showed a lot of cleavage and much of her legs. She and Isane had put their foot down. She wasn't going dressed like some cheap hooker on her very first date ever. After looking around the shop for a while, she had noticed this dress and it had practically screamed her name. She didn't mind that it showed her bare back because she usually took off her Captain Haori when she was training with Naruto, so he had seen it many times already. Her cheek suddenly tinted a bit pink when she took in Naruto's outfit. It was a quite simple outfit. Black pants with 2 red stripes on each leg and a short-sleeved white button-up shirt with orange swirls on the left side. The shirt gave her a clear view of those sleek and strong arms of his and it hugged his upper body nicely. She noted that he kept his hair in the usual spiky fashion with a wild ponytail in the back. She didn't mind the wild look, it was somehow exciting. Before she had a chance to compliment his outfit, he spoke. "You look beautiful tonight, Soifan. Please come in." Blushing up a storm, Soifan wanted to hide her face. How could she blush so much when Yuruchi had been teasing her constantly? She wasn't sure if it was because of the long time since she had been complimented on her looks or if it was because he was complimenting her. Not trusting her voice right now, she just nodded and walked in. As she walked over to the dining table, she noticed that the lighting had been turned down slightly. At the table, a lone candle was burning, but what surprised her was the napkins on the plates. On the plate across from her was a folded paper fox with 9 tails splayed behind it. On her plate, however, was a butterfly, folded to look like her Shikai's death mark. Her eyes started filling with tears, but she wasn't sure if she should laugh or cry. Laugh at how morbid it was, or cry, because no one had done something like that for her before. Hearing the clinking of pots and shuffling in the kitchen, she hurriedly wiped away any trace of her tears before she sat down. Focusing on her other senses, she could smell a delicious aroma wafting from the kitchen. Her mouth almost started to water. She couldn't remember ever going out to eat before, so most of her meals were plain. As Naruto brought the food with him, he noticed how she was smiling faintly. He had noticed that it had been forced when they had first met, but gradually she had started to show a true smile. Although he still didn't know what had happened in her past, he was glad that he was slowly breaking through to her. Setting down the food, he started to fill up her bowl, before filling his own. "I hope you like it. It's a simple stew with vegetables, fish and rice at the side." Tasting it, she noticed how rich the flavor was. The blend of the different vegetables and the fish made for a delicious meal, and she was hard-pressed not to destroy her bowl. Seeing that she wanted seconds, Naruto gave a slight chuckle. After filling her bowl anew, he went to the kitchen to pick up a teapot and 2 cups. As they ate, they settled into a comfortable silence. Soifan had complimented the food as some of the best she had ever tasted. Naruto had jokingly replied that she would have to get used to it if she planned to have more than this one date with him. She had been a bit nervous about the date, but they were just talking and telling stories like they used to, so she managed to relax a bit. Having finished the eating, she was suddenly unsure what to do with her hands, so she put one of them on the table. Naruto had noticed a slight shift in her posture. She had been a bit tense when she had showed up, so he was happy that she had managed to relax. Seeing that her hand was on the table, he wanted to see how she would react. Soifan was staring at her hand. Then she gave a quick glance towards Naruto. He had softly put his hand over hers, and she didn't know what to do. It felt so safe and comfortable that she resisted the urge to pull her hand back. She blushed and looked at her hand again. She noticed that his hand was able to cover hers completely, however, his thumb was just hanging there. Suddenly feeling bold, she helped guide his thumb around her hand with her own, so he was holding around her hand. She noted that it felt good to hold hands like this, and she suddenly wondered if they would be doing this in public in the future. Naruto was happy by the way she had reacted. It proved that he was getting through to her and that she at the least was trying to set her pain aside. Touching her hand gave him the same feelings he had whenever he held hands with his wives, so he felt encouraged by her action. He could only hope that they would grow closer because he truly enjoyed this. Soifan felt warmth spread through her whole body. He squeezed her hand gently and it made her heart flutter. This was completely different from how Yuruchi had teased her in the past. With this simple gesture, she blushed even more, but when she looked up, she saw that he gave her a caring smile. Squeezing back, she saw that his eyes sparkled with happiness. So content was she that she almost missed the hell butterfly that was flying between them. Naruto had also noticed it and was now following its movements with his eyes. The moment had been shattered, but she didn't want him to let go, so she put up her other hand for the butterfly to land on. Noticing that her demeanor changed when she received the message, Naruto realized that their date was near its end. There was always work to be done, so he tensed his muscles in anticipation to stand up. She noticed that she had tensed slightly when she had received the message. It was a special mission requested by the Captain Commander himself. She felt a bit sad that their work had broken such a nice moment, but she assured herself that it would be fine. There was, after all, no reason why they wouldn't be able to have more dates. She wasn't sure where this sudden boldness was coming from, but she let it lead her to stand up and pull her date with her towards the door. She would explain it all in the morning, but for now she wanted to wrap up the date, so with it she turned around, still holding his hand. "I'm sorry that work had us cut this short, but I really enjoyed this date." Stuttering slightly, she added. I'm hoping we can do it again, perhaps next Saturday if work allows." Naruto felt thrilled that she had enjoyed the date. He would have to come up with something new for that date, and his excitement was clear in his eyes. Taking her hand, he lifted it up and gently kissed it. "I can only hope that the next date will be as enjoyable as this one." Feeling the blush creeping up her cheeks, Soifan let her emotions guide her. Quick as a thunderclap, she stood on tiptoes and kissed his cheek. She was unsure of many things regarding love, but most of her romance novels stated that this was a sort of thank you if you had enjoyed a date. Giving his hand one more squeeze, she quickly ran out his apartment before her blush could leave her completely red-faced. Naruto stood there in the doorway. He was stunned for all of 2 seconds before his face split in a massive grin. He barely had enough self-control not to whoop loudly. He wasn't sure how soundproof the walls were, so he instead whooped loudly inside his mind. His face suddenly dropped a bit, but the smile was soon back full force. Neither he nor his friends were able to sense any deceit from her. He had hated to ask them to observe her, but he had to be sure. Now he could go to sleep with a smile on his face, dreaming up ways to make the next date as pleasant as possible. Soifan had made her way back to her own small apartment in record time. Quickly closing her door, she tiredly slid down with her back against it. The mission was all but forgotten as she held the hand he had kissed close to her heart. She would tell him about the mission tomorrow, but for now she wanted to savor the feelings that were close to bursting out of her. Getting ready for bed, Soifan went to sleep with a small smile on her face. This would be the first night in 50 years where she wasn't tormented by dreams of Yoruichi leaving her, but rather dreaming wonderful dreams about the single kiss Naruto had given her. Washing day. Naruto was rubbing his head furiously. It was the same every damn week. Some unknown Shinigami worker had washed his clothes, he had brushed his teeth, and he had showered. He had then taken another shower, and then a third shower. It didn't help. His body let out a foul odor, seemingly from his stomach area. Sighing, he sat down and went into a meditative trance. When he opened his eyes, he was standing in the lowest level of his mind. He took note that everyone that was supposed to be there were present. Starting at random, he noted that his zanpakuto spirit was as clean as he was. Not surprisingly, since they were supposed to be somehow linked to one another. Turning left, he noted that Shukaku was also pretty clean. He could still remember how hard it had been to rinse all his sand for blood. It hadn't been pleasant for any of them. Next was Kurama. He was looking regal as ever. Trying to be a good example, his fur coat was shining, and it looked like someone had combed it. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see that his zanpakuto spirit was hiding a large comb behind her back. He guessed that she would be most relaxed around Kurama as well. Next was Jayuki. He wasn't sure why he even bothered, since Jayuki usually lived underwater. The only time Jayuki had had a reason to clean up was that time he visited Shukaku in his desert. There had been sand everywhere. Temei was next, and her wings were as beautiful as ever. Such a nice color, both yellow, orange and red. Since Temei resembled an insect, she could release pheromones that smelled good or bad depending on the situation. She usually only let out the bad-smelling type whenever she felt she was in danger, so she was out of the question too. Seiken stood next in line. Naruto had been a bit suspicious about him in the beginning. The slug-like being was thought to smell bad, but then he had developed that soap bubble jutsu, and everything had taken care of itself. Hakuo stood proud in line. She was one of the more respectful of the tailed beasts. Her half-horse, half-dolphin appearance gave an air of peace and tranquility. Kakuo lived as much on land as in the sea, and being friends with Naruto had made her respect his request to stay clean. Son Goku was the 8th king and third to last. His fur was also clean, and just eyeing it sent a shiver down Naruto's back. He wasn't sure how, when or from where, but after roughly 1 month Son Goku had started complaining about fleas. Naruto had had to remove fleas the size of apples from his fur, and since then he had sworn never to have to do so again. With the help from Kakuo, they had managed to find a solution by boiling the water Son Goku would use to take a bath. Quickly moving his gaze, his eyes fell on Isobu. Isobu was a turtle with many spike-like protrusions on his shell. He was also a water dweller, but that shell was often used as living grounds for balanidae and anemones. Seiken had been invaluable in helping to remove them. Thanks to his secretion, the sea creatures would all die because the pH of the water was too high for them to live. His gaze last fell on Matatabi. The two-tails burning cat and the root of his problems. Yes, she was on fire most of the time, but because of that and the fact that she was a cat made taking a bath extremely difficult. Sighing again, he had to ask. Why are you making this so difficult? I know you hate water, but you must know how much it pains us to force you to do this. She was slowly backing away and hissing all the time. She knew what was to come, but if she answered, she could possibly stall a few more moments. You know it goes against my very nature to take a bath. Hey, stay back from me. The others had turned towards her. She was one of them, but they would do it, both for themselves and for her too. Giving a nod of his head, Shukaku and Son Goku created a large basin with the help of their sand and lava. Isobu and Kakuo started filling it with water as soon as the walls had set. Seiken put on the finishing touch by adding a bit of his soap. Preparations complete, they all surrounded her and started to close in. A huge release of chakra made them stop in their tracks. Matatabi's flames that had previously burned blue were now almost invisible. They were burning so hot that the other tailed beasts backed away slightly so as not to get severe burns. This time she would put up a far greater fight than usual. They had never seen flames so hot before, even the flames of Amaterasu seemed like a warm summer's breeze compared to this. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see his zanpakuto speared. He noticed that her nose twitched a few times before she ran forward giggling. Jumping high in the air, she landed on the back of the flaming cat, seemingly unable to be burned by the intense flames. Taking a deep breath through her nose, she happily exclaimed. The smell is gone. Burned away by the intense flames. At that, all the tailed beasts visibly relaxed, but none more than Matatabi. She slumped down and started to lick her paw before scratching behind her left ear. Her flames had turned back to the usual blue. Letting out a deep breath, she laid down before speaking, the danger seemingly over. That was too close. Not again, never again. I only have so many lives left after the last time. Naruto was happy that they had found a solution that didn't involve forced bathing. He could still remember how she had run around the whole place in a frenzy after they had dunked her the last time. Chapter 5. The Death of a Friend. Naruto was running across Sarate with a small group of Shinigami from the 2nd Division. Their mission was to locate and destroy a hollow that had managed to infiltrate the lower levels of the Rukongai districts. It was 4 days after the first date with Soifon, and they had been searching for just as many days. It was not rare for hollows to manage to get into Soul Society. They were usually easy to detect, and they would often get caught in the higher levels of the Rukongai, far away from Sarate. However, this time it was not the case. It had all started with a few disappearances, but it had escalated into almost 40 people, where 7 of them were Shinigami, although all of them were lowly ranked. The strangest part was that it was somehow able to suppress most of its spiritual pressure, which made it hard to locate. This was probably why the disappearances had been happening for the last 2 weeks. Naruto and his squad had been ordered to sweep the District 7 to 12 on the east side of Sarate. Their objective? Locate and exterminate the hollow. Naruto hadn't had the time to go on any practice runs to the human world, so he had no experience fighting hollows. Nevertheless, had his captain promoted him to 3rd seat shortly after receiving the mission. She had told him that even though he had less experience as a Shinigami, she felt that his experience as a ninja, combined with his growing strength, made up for it. She had walked him through some of his new responsibilities shortly after promoting him, and one in particular stuck to his mind. As a higher-seated officer, he would now be in charge of the only prison belonging to the detention unit, known as the Maggot's Nest. Flashback: they were standing outside a metallic door cut into the cliff wall. 2 members of the detention unit were standing guard by the door, and Naruto noted that 4 more were hiding in the shadows. Naruto wanted to shake his head at this. If he could notice them with the help of only his ninja skills, then how easy would it be to detect them for someone that was trained in detecting spiritual pressure? He mused that perhaps he would take a larger role in the squad stealth training once he became the vice captain. He thought it was a bit strange to remove all weapons before entering the prison facility, but realized that inexperienced Shinigami could have their zanpakuto stolen, and this could lead to escape attempts. As they walked down the barely lit stairs, Soifon explained his duties. As warden of the Maggot's Nest, it is your job keep track of the prisoners. You will be required to write down a general description and crime of any new prisoners, as well as notify me if any of the prisoners died during their stay here. Naruto was surprised that the prisoners weren't confined to private cells. He remembered that the prisoners in Fire Country were locked away during the night and had to work most of the day. They would receive a seal that prevented use of chakra, and the warden would make sure the guards maintained the peace by punishing aggressive behavior. Here, he would make sure they were locked up, but he wasn't responsible for their safety once inside. They had now come to the 2nd lowest level of the Maggot's Nest. Soifon had mentioned that there was 1 level below this one, but it was kept for extremely dangerous people that had to be locked up around the clock. Entering, Naruto noted that the lights were kept down, giving the roughly cut stone walls a ghostly green glow. The lights came from fluorescent lamps along the ceiling, allowing for few shadows. Along the walls there were several open rooms where the prisoners could sleep. Hearing that someone entered through the only door, several prisoners walked out of the rooms and joined a few other prisoners in the large open area in the middle. They were mostly looking at him with curiosity. Some sneered in contempt, while others were eyeing him warily. Some of them could remember what happened the last time a blonde person walked in and slowly backed away. Naruto noted that most of the prisoners were big and muscular, probably resorting to training for passing the time. Others were watching with cunning eyes, while some just huddled in the rooms trying to avoid his gaze. Soifon had told him about the test that was given to new wardens of the prison, so Naruto wasn't surprised when she took a few steps back and leaned towards the back wall with her arms crossed. The muscular prisoners moved closer at this, pulling different makeshift weapons from their person as they advanced. A few held jagged rocks that had been sharpened, while others had rusted metal pipes or simply wrapped some cloth around their knuckles. A big muscular man that looked like he was 7 feet tall and almost 4 feet wide at the shoulders led them. He had long black hair falling down his back in a tangled mess. His beady black eyes were looking down on him, and his large mouth was set in a sneer. His large arms had many scars and tattoos of barbed wire running from the wrists and up to the shoulders. He was wearing filthy rags across his torso, and his pants were torn in many places. In his hands were probably the least rusty of the collection of metal pipes. It was roughly 4 feet long and had a sharp point that had spots of dried blood on it. In a deep but still loud voice he called out. "Hey you blonde bastard. Who do you think you are, coming down here and thinking you are suddenly in charge? I am Orikaden Kina, big stupid, previous 4th seed of the 11th division, and for thinking you can just come down here, I'll kill you." Naruto blinked once, then twice as he stood there, seemingly frozen in fear as the giant of a man charged him. His face, however, remained impassive as the large man prepared to break his head with a vertical swing of the pipe. As if in slow motion, Naruto was able to see every motion that went into the swing, and in the last second he took a step to his left, allowing the pipe to fly past him and harmlessly slam into the ground. A few sparks flew as the metal connected with stone before the pipe was set into motion again in a flurry of blows and stabs. Naruto ducked and dodged expertly, same impassive face, never letting the metal pipe so much as grace him. He could almost feel the bigger man getting more and more angry as the fight continued. Deciding to end it, Naruto timed the downward swing of the pipe and stopped it with the palm of his left hand. Time seemed to stand still as everyone was holding their breath, waiting for what would happen next. Naruto locked eyes with his enemy, and for a moment they turned a deep crimson with slitted pupils. As if he had just seen his worst nightmare, the large man stumbled back a few steps, shaking in fear. As soon as they had turned crimson, the eyes reverted back to the normal blue, making the onlookers wonder if they had even seen it or not. The giant was snapped out of his fear by Naruto's eager voice. "Hey, since you want to kill me, I can finally test out one of my new attacks." Naruto for the first time in the fight took a fighting stance. His legs were in a wide stance, with the knees bent to almost 90 degrees. His hands were both open, with the left palm pointing up in front of his body and the right held up against his chest, with the edge facing inwards. The giant was apprehensive now that the blonde was ready to attack, so he brought the pipe behind his back like a baseball bat and prepared for the charge. In a voice barely higher than a whisper he could hear, Uzumaki style. "Shite. Palm heal 1. He blinked and then the blonde was gone. Looking down, he noticed that he was already inside his guard. Before he could blink again or even prepare for the attack, he was struck in the chest with a single palm. The force of the blow was enough to send him almost 10 meters back. The only noise that could be heard was of the metal pipe that clattered on the stone floor. As he looked around, he noted that most of the prisoners were now backing off slowly, clearly afraid of him. Noticing a hand on his shoulder, he turned his head to look at an amused Soifon. "Well done, Warden Uzumaki." Flashback end. Naruto, followed by his squad, jumped down and landed in front of a house. It had a plain cream color, an almost flat roof, and a few windows. This was the house of one of the victims of the Hollow. There had already been a primary investigation, but he had wanted to see for himself what he could learn from one of the crime scenes. Walking through the house, he noticed a few things. The first was that the door showed no signs of forced entry. The second was that there was almost no damage to the house. If not for the broken flower pot in the living room, you would think that the occupants were only out to buy some groceries. Sitting down in the middle of the floor, Naruto contacted his lifelong partner. "Hey Kurama. Can you sense any ill intent close by?" After a few seconds of waiting the Great Fox answered. "I can, however, as you know, without chakra my range is severely limited from what I can tell. One source of evil entered, but when it left, the signature was slightly different. Like how Orochimaru's aura was slightly changed whenever he would switch bodies. Too." Nodding in thanks, Naruto rose to his feet before addressing his squad. "This house once housed a married couple. Did we receive the report of both missing simultaneously, or did one of them disappear before the other?" There was a momentary pause before one of them stepped forward to speak. "We did in fact receive a report that Miss Kfu, married couple, had not come home after an early shopping trip. By the next morning, Mr. Kfu was reported missing by one of the neighbors." Naruto nodded slightly, finding that the information confirmed what Kurama had sensed. Speaking up, he started giving orders to his squad. "Listen up. This hollow is not to be taken lightly, so when we move out to investigate this district, I want you to pair up and stay alert at all times. The abilities of this hollow is as of yet unknown, but we can suspect from the evidence here that it might be able to either shape-shift or hypnotize its victims." Seeing his squad give nods in acknowledgement, Naruto continued. "Should you discover the hollow, you are under no circumstance to engage it. You will follow it in the shadows and call for backup. The last thing we want is for the hollow to go on a rampage." With that, the squad split up, leaving a single member left to accompany him. He was a bit amused by this, but he did say to team up, so he only motioned for the Shinigami to follow him. On a nearby rooftop, Soifon was overlooking the scene. She had used a Keto spell to enhance her hearing, so she was able to hear everything that was said. She was impressed by how Naruto had broken down the details and given out orders. It was clear that he had experience in leadership by how he had handled the situation, and she couldn't wait for him to step up and take the seat as vice captain. Should he prove worthy, she might even consider stepping down and letting him be in charge, but she wasn't sure if she wanted him to suffer through all that paperwork. Later that night, Naruto stepped out of the shower. His squad hadn't found anything, and another squad had relieved his to continue the search. As he got dressed, he contemplated the events that had happened today. They hadn't gotten any more leads on the hollow. Kurama was unable to track it, and the only reason he was able to sense it in the first place was because it had lingered at the crime scene for several hours. 3. On an unrelated note, Soifan had approached him after his search had ended. She must have had as good a time during their date as him because she had asked if they could move the second date to later today. Naturally, he was a bit miffed that they would go on a date while others were searching for the hollow, but Naruto had learned that he couldn't do everything himself. He would let the other Shinigami do their job while he was out enjoying the evening with Soifan. He had told her that he would pick her up outside her apartment at 2100 hours. When she had asked what they would be doing, he had replied that it was a secret but that she should dress according to the weather. Naruto had decided to wear the same pants as he had on his previous date. He had bought a few more shirts in different colors and had chosen one that was deep crimson for the evening. He put on the black jacket he had bought to complete his outfit. Naruto dully noted that by now, his zanpakuto had become a natural part of any attire he wore. He thought back to his ninja days and realized that he had carried weapons with him wherever he went, even when he was out with his wives or kids. Perhaps even more then. He hadn't had the time to find a blacksmith that could make his usual ninja gear, but then again, without his chakra, he wouldn't be able to use them to their fullest potential. Before he left, he took a trip to the kitchen and brought with him a medium-sized knitted basket with lids. He grumbled a bit since not being able to seal it meant that half the surprise would be lost when he picked up Soifan. Walking along the halls of the barracks, Naruto noted that everyone who lived here had the name and rank placed on the door. It was probably a nice touch if you were a rookie and didn't know your way around, but should something happen, it could be exploited to dangerous levels. He would have to suggest it be removed to reduce the risk should an invasion happen. Coming up to his destination, a door with a large number 2 on it, he knocked softly and waited. On the other side of the door, Soifan was just finished preparing. She was a bit frustrated with her squad for not being able to find the hollow. It was a massive blow to the squad's pride that the hollow had escaped notice for over 2 weeks. It had been quite some time since the last big incident where something happened, and it was clear that her squad had become rusty since then. She would have to talk with Naruto later about a training regime for the rest of the squad in case a similar case should happen. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, she took note of her appearance. Her hair hadn't changed much in the last 50 years actually. The metal rings could be used as a distraction should she ever fight someone that avoided her initial strike, not that many were able to mind you. She had taken note that Naruto seemed to like the dress she had used on their previous date, so she had opted to use it again. Remembering that he had mentioned she should dress for the weather, she had added a sleeveless short-cut vest to her outfit in order to cover her back. It was black like most of her other clothing, but it did have 2 yellow stripes going horizontally across her back. She didn't know if it was her zanpakuto that influenced the color design or not, but at this point, it probably didn't matter. Her zanpakuto was a part of her, like she was a part of it, so it probably meant that she enjoyed those colors. Hearing a soft knock on her door snapped her out of her thoughts. She quickly put on some sandals. She had realized that no matter how high heels she would wear, she wouldn't be able to measure up to Naruto. Walking over, she opened the door to see the man she was waiting for. "Good evening, Soifan, you look as beautiful as ever. Are you ready?" Naruto held out his hand for her to take. She took note that the black jacket and deep red shirt made him look quite handsome. In his other hand she saw a straw basket, so she guessed that he had planned a picnic for the evening. It would be her first, but she was sure she would enjoy it nonetheless. She was again blushing a bit from the compliment, so she could do nothing but nod and take his hand. As they walked, the sun was on its way towards the horizon, giving the sky and the few clouds a multicolored hue. They walked through a small forest, momentarily hiding the sky from view. As they made it to a clearing, the sky was almost completely orange, with the clouds a light shade of pink. Soifan could only stare in amazement. With her duties and rigorous training, she never had the time to simply take in the amazing nature around her. Beautiful. Naruto looked at her with a small smile on his face. He was happy that he could give her this. "I agree. When time allowed it, I would always stand on the highest point in my village and look at the sunset." Setting down the basket, Naruto took out a large blanket and laid it down on the grass. Like that, they sat, Soifan leaning against the larger Naruto, watching the sunset. How will we eat now that the sun is down?" Naruto chuckled a bit. He hadn't spoken much about what they would be doing today, but she had guessed correctly that the basket contained more than just the blanket. Standing up, he made a motion for her to just watch him. Soifan was surprised when he began to chant a Keto spell. "Be Lord. Mask of blood and flesh, all creation, flutter of wings, ye who bears the name of man." Inferno and Pandemonium, the sea barrier surges, march on the south. Hado number 31. Shakuho, red fire cannon. Building up a small red ball in the palm of his hand, Naruto rapidly chanted another spell, while the ball slowly shot from his hand. Disintegrate, you black dog of Rondinini. Look upon yourself with horror and tear out your own throat. Bakuto number 9. Horin disintegrating circle. An orange ball with yellow spirals gathered in his hand before a long rope shot after the red ball. The rope caught the ball before it had cleared the treetops, before it started to pull it back towards the ground. Not 5 meters above ground, it stopped and cast a red light over the clearing. Naruto placed the end of the rope to his back so he could continue to feed it the energy it needed. Sitting down, Naruto glanced over to Soifan, only to see that she was gaping openly. She couldn't help it. Even if the two spells were low level, very few, if any, intermediate Kido practitioners would be able to perform such a feat. Soifan could clearly see that Naruto had the potential to be a master Kido practitioner if he had advanced so quickly. It was almost scary to think what he would be able to do once he learned the higher level spells. Rubbing the back of his head, as if to throw it all off, Naruto started explaining. I would have used a barrier Kido if it wasn't for the fact that most barriers that can keep something in stasis while still emitting light are too advanced at the moment. Not to mention that it would take far more concentration than a simple Bakuto. Soifan was only slightly less slack-jawed, but managed to pull through. In a deathly quiet voice that put Naruto slightly on edge, she asked. And how long have you been able to manipulate Kido to this extent? Naruto instantly knew that the answer had better be right or he was in for a round of ass-kicking in the morning. He probably still was, but if he got the answer right he might lessen it. Rubbing the back of his neck again, he tried to mend the situation as best he could. Now you see the thing is I have this thing for trying out unconventional uses for techniques and so long as I keep a steady stream of spirit pressure into it, I can maintain it for as long as I want. By the look on her face his words weren't helping much, so thinking quickly, Naruto pulled out some of the food he had brought. The food seemed to pacify her a bit. He had made simple maki rolls with salmon, ginger and chopped vegetables. On the side were a few rice balls and a portable tea set. She grumbled a bit that he had managed to distract her, but soon ate with a small smile on her lips. After sipping a bit of tea, Soifan had relaxed enough to calmly ask the most pressing question. If your other skills are half as good as your Kido skills, I can't help but wonder why you haven't tried out for vice captain. I know for a fact that Amida is abysmal at Kido. Naruto let out a deep sigh. He had hoped that she would have overlooked the small feat, but he had forgotten how good she was at spotting even the tiniest detail. He guessed there was no hiding from her, but he had hoped to stay in the shadows for a while longer. Taking a deep breath, Naruto started. You no doubt know how ninja depended largely on deception, right? Giving a small nod, Naruto went on. You have no doubt noticed, but I have been holding back a lot whenever I train out in the open. You can hardly disagree that it's a bit suspicious that I was suddenly brought back to life now of all times. My gut feeling tells me that something big is coming, and I figured the best way to prepare was to hide my abilities in case there is a spy in our midst. Thus being the third seat keeps me in the open way too much for my liking as it is. Soifan for her part hadn't expected that. She could only stare at him while she thought over what he had said. The captain commander had briefed her, but she was sure that he held back information. It wasn't her place to pry for the information, but it did irk her that she wasn't trusted with the truth. Rubbing her forehead, she let out a displeased sigh. I guess you are right. I didn't think about it before, and it only shows how we have let our skills fade with time. It would be simple to infiltrate Sirte as it is now. I'll see what I can do about keeping your training a secret after. What else she had to say was cut off as they both felt a growing spiritual pressure further inside the forest. Naruto instantly recognized it. He had felt it on multiple occasions when Kain and Rukia had their sparring matches, but it was stronger tonight, more desperate. With a wordless glance to Soifan, he cut the flow to his spells, allowing the clearing to go dark. Without any more delay, they quickly leapt off towards what was surely a desperate fight. With Rukia and Kain. 10 minutes earlier. Pain Shiba was struggling to rein in his temper. Everyone had been on their toes since word got out that a hollow had infiltrated the lower levels of the Rukongai district. He had been shocked to the core when he found out that the hollow had killed his wife, Miyako. Shock soon turned to rage, as he could still sense the lingering spiritual pressure of the hollow. He had swiftly followed, hoping to at least get revenge on the hollow that had taken his love away. Rukia had just arrived at her vice captain's quarters. They had set this time to train Rukia in the use of her Shikai. So no Shirayuki. She had only managed to learn 2 attacks from her zanpakuto spirit so far, but she believed that there was still much to learn. Walking inside, she was surprised to see several members of the squad talking. Looking past them to try and locate Kain, she suddenly let out a gasp. There on the floor was the body of Kain's wife, third seat Miyako Shiba. Her Shinigami robes and the floor were all stained in blood. Pain must have gone after the killer, which begged the question. Why were the other squad members here and not out there helping the vice captain? Thinking quickly, Rukia located her vice captain's spiritual pressure and ran towards it. He had a small head start, but with some luck, she would catch up soon. Back to Kain, he had just caught up with the hollow. The hollow had for some reason stopped, and when he noticed he had forced himself to slow down in order to clear his mind. It wouldn't do if he fell into a trap just because he rushed in without thinking. As he slowly approached the clearing, he saw that the hollow was looking directly at him, like if it knew that he had followed it. Now, Shinigami rarely used surprise to win their battles, but it was never a good sign if your opponent was waiting for you. His sword was already out before he entered the clearing. He probably wasn't thinking clearly, but right now, it felt right to overwhelm it by superior force before grinding it into oblivion. Rukia had increased her speed once again. She wasn't aware that she could move this fast, but when she felt the state of her mentor's spiritual pressure, it didn't really matter. She could feel that Kain was locked in a desperate fight, and if the distress she felt was any indication, then he was losing. Quickly entering the clearing where she felt the spiritual pressure, she took note of the damage Kain's Shikai had wrought. The ground was soaked, and a few trees were broken in half by what must have been a powerful surge of water. Her eyes suddenly snapped over to a writhing blob on the ground. She watched in abject horror as Kain's upper torso was slowly dragged into the blob that clearly must have been a hollow. He was still alive somehow, and as his eyes found her, he mouthed the words, "Avenge me," while it is distracted. Tears were streaming down her face as she soundlessly readied her sword. She knew that it was probably too late for her mentor, but it still felt so wrong. Opening her mouth in a silent battle cry, she jumped high in the air before plunging the sword into the center of the blob. As the blob seemingly dissolved, Rukia found herself kneeling with her sword plunged through the stomach of the still whole body of Kain Shiba. As in slow motion, blood began to seep out of his mouth as the light in his eyes was fading away. With his last strength, he reached out to cup her face with one arm before speaking his last words. "Thank you. I can now go to my wife in peace." Naruto had sped up as much as his body would allow. His mind wouldn't allow any less as he felt the fight turn for the worse. Crashing into the clearing, he took note of the destruction before his eyes locked on the two people in the center. As he watched, Kain's hand fell as the last light in his eyes faded and the blood started pooling around him. Without thinking, Naruto was about to draw his sword, prepared to strike Rukia down on the spot. What stopped him was the distressed shout from Kurama. "Kit. You have to listen to me. This isn't what it looks like." Calming down slightly, but not letting go of his zanpakuto, Naruto waited for his trusted partner to explain. "I know you always took it hard when someone close to you died, but even you should feel that there are 3 spiritual pressures in this clearing. At some point 2 of them are even mixed, so it is clear that the hollow got to your friend. Speaking about the hollow, I can sense that it is materializing about 50 meters to your right." Turning to his captain, he gave a curt nod before going in the direction Kurama had mentioned. Walking in between the trees, Naruto soon found what he was looking for. On the forest floor was a blob that seemed to slowly reform out of nothingness. Deciding to end this quickly, as to not give it a chance to escape, Naruto started to chant a spell as his spiritual pressure climbed. Ashes of the underworld, claim what is lost. Pointed horn, twisted rope, box of wood. Rise like the sun, and fall like the moon. The House of Cards Full. 5, Hado number 54. Heian. Abolishing flames. A purple oval circle materialized in his hand before he flung it at the hollow that by now was frozen in fear. As it hit, the hollow and all the trees behind it for 60 meters were engulfed in pure orange fire. As the lights died down, there was no trace of what the fire had engulfed. Not even ashes remained, as the forest now had a new clearing where the grass was somehow left untouched. Nodding to himself, Naruto returned to the previous clearing to see that Soifan held a trembling Rukia in her arms. It was clear that Rukia needed this more than Soifan needed her pride as a captain of the second squad. Sitting down beside them, Naruto took Soifan's hand in his, while she used the other to pet Rukia's hair, whispering soothing words for only Rukia to hear. When Rukia had cried herself to sleep, they decided to return her to the Kichiki clan compound before delivering the sad news to Kain's remaining family. As they stood outside the compound, Byakuya Kichiki met them. After explaining the situation, he gently picked her up from Soifan's grasp, thanking them for bringing her to him. As they arrived at the Shiba clan compound, they received a less pleasant welcome. Kukaku Shiba was a woman that looked to be in her late 20s. She has rough black hair that reaches to her lower back and is slightly covered in a bandana. She has green eyes and wears a red robe that shows off her waist and ample bosom. Her right arm is missing from just above the elbow and the rest of her right arm is bandaged. Soifan could remember that she was a fairly outgoing woman from the time she had visited along with Hiruchi, but upon seeing the body of her brother in Naruto's arms, she quickly became somber. They were both invited in so they could explain the situation. The compound was located close to the west gate of Sirte, which was the reason why she wanted the privacy of her home. As they explained the situation, Naruto and Soifan could clearly see that she was struggling to keep back her tears. Speaking in a broken voice, she says, "Thank you for bringing him back to me, as well as avenging his death. I know it's not much, but you have the gratitude of the Shiba clan. If it's not too much to ask, I would like you to join me in a moment's silence for my deceased brother." As they both nodded, Kukaku gave a small bow before giving a silent prayer. As she finished, her younger brother Ganju barges in. He has shoulder-length black hair, fully covered by a bandana. He wears a white shirt with a small green vest that looks several sizes too small for his muscular body. Upon seeing his brother laying peacefully on the floor between the three occupants of the room, something seems to snap inside his mind. Seeing the only injury on his body matches that of a stab wound from a sword, he quickly reaches a conclusion before pointing an accusing finger towards the two Shinigami. "So you killed Kain, and now you are here to gloat to the only family he has left." Kukaku got a bit angry at the accusation, but reined in her temper. She told her brother that the two weren't the ones who killed him and that they merely brought his body back to his family. Ganju seemed to accept that, but still felt he needed to leave one last scathing remark. "So this is all a fellow Shinigami is to you? Once they have served their purpose, you just leave them behind. If that is so, then I don't want anything to do with Shinigami ever again." Now it was Naruto's turn to get angry. The man's brother had just died, so this was probably a way to deal with the loss, but he didn't have to go that far. However, this was the Shiba clan household, so it wouldn't be right to lose his temper here. Reining in his anger, Naruto stood up while helping Soifan doing the same. With a quick bow to Kukaku, they both left without another word. They walked back to the barracks in silence, holding hands a bit tighter than normal. It was clear that today had been emotionally draining for both of them. The romantic picnic was ruined, and a friend and another high-ranking Shinigami had been killed. It was barely midnight, but both were almost dead on their feet as they walked the last corridor up to Soifan's apartment. As Naruto was about to bid her a good night, she hugged him tight while speaking in a cracked voice. "Please don't leave me. Not you too." Naruto, even in his exhausted state, was quick to catch up. This was probably linked to the reason why Soifan acted the way she did around him. The conversation at the Shiba clan compound must have triggered a bad memory. Naruto quickly returned the hug before whispering softly, "It's okay, Soifan. I'm not going anywhere. If you really want me, I'll be yours forever." Her body shook a bit and it seemed she was lost for words, so she only nodded into his chest. She was in a fragile state, so Naruto decided to do something he hoped would help her. He softly lifted her up and held her to his chest in a bridal carry, trying to radiate as much love and compassion as possible. As she looked up to him, he gave her a brilliant smile, and she could feel the heat coming from him in waves, telling her that nothing would ever harm her as long as she stayed like this. She nuzzled into his chest as he carried her inside, desperately clinging to his body for comfort. As they got into the bedroom, Naruto sat her gently on the bed before removing his jacket and shirt. She blushed a bit at seeing his muscular chest, and even more when he helped her remove her vest, but she knew she was safe with him, so she didn't protest. As they lay down on the queen-sized bed, Naruto put his strong arms around her stomach and nuzzled into her neck. Before sleep claimed him, he noted that she smelled faintly of vanilla. It made him smile, knowing that it was so faint that only he would be able to smell it. He gave her a soft kiss on the head before drifting off to sleep. As Soifan lay there, she scooted a bit closer to his chest, smiling slightly when she noted that his arms picked up the slack. She could feel his strong heartbeat and the steady breathing on her neck. She let a single tear fall as she felt so safe and wanted in his embrace. Just before letting sleep claim her, she softly whispered, "Thank you, Naruto-kun." Jin and Kanem at the circus, slight spoiler for future chapters. It was a few weeks after Urahara Kisuke and Uruchi Shihoin had escaped from Soul Society with the still-alive Holophete Shinigami. Aizen had continued his observations of the hybrid Shinigami. When he was certain that they would live, he had claimed that the experiment was a success. Aizen was in such a good mood that he allowed his two most trusted subordinates a few days off. Kanem wanted to take a trip to the grave of the one he loved, but Jin, always one for trying to lighten the mood, had other plans. Thus, we find Jin and Kanem in a circus at the edge of Karakura town. Kanem had resisted at first, saying that he wouldn't be able to have any fun because of his lack of vision, but eventually gave in. He wore loose blue jeans, a white short-sleeved shirt, a black jacket and a pair of blue sunglasses. His hair was in an afro style with 5 large spikes pointing slightly backwards. Jin, on the other hand, was dressed in beige jeans, a white button-up shirt and a brown jacket. He looked quite handsome while walking among the stalls. His azure eyes drank in all the sights, and there was a serene smile on his face. It was always fun to annoy his squad mates, but today he was enjoying himself more than he had in years. A little ways behind him, Jin could hear a woman calling out for his friend. "Hey mister. Would you like me to style your hair for you? Hanum was taken slightly by surprise from that statement. He liked how his hair was now, however it took him almost an hour each morning to get it just right. Perhaps it was time to try something new. I would like that. Do you have any recommendations? Jin hadn't expected that, but was happy nonetheless. If nothing else, it would make Hanum think about something else for a while. Pulling a hand through his own hair, he dully noted that a few women were taking sneaking glances at him. If only his silver hair would gain him the attention from a certain redeed he knew. Seeing a large tent with a sign saying magic fortunes for those who dare, he quickly made his way over. Back with Hanum, he was talking animatedly with the hairdresser. His heart had been crushed when the husband had killed the woman he had once loved. He was now starting to feel like he could love again. They had both agreed that Rastafari braids would look good on him, so he had gotten to know her while she braided him. He could tell that she was a very happy individual, and even though he probably wouldn't meet her again, he couldn't help but smile. As she finished, he paid her handsomely before walking away, hair swaying in the light breeze. In the distance, he could hear someone say something that drew his attention. Jin had entered the tent to find an old woman dressed up like a gypsy. She was so short that he for a second wondered if gravity was affecting her more than normal. She had wild hair, a few gold bands on her fingers and brown hazy eyes. Sitting down in front of her, she seemed to snap out of a trance. Her eyes were now more focused, and she suddenly spoke in an ominous voice. So you have come to hear your fortune. I trust you are prepared, for once you hear you can never go back. Jin was now a bit apprehensive, but he wouldn't back down. Yes, I would like you to tell me what's in my future. You know, work, love. That kind of thing. Walking over to a small shelf, she opened 2 drawers and took out 2 concealed objects. She put them down on a small table that sat between them. These here are dragon bones and the faith deck of cards. They will surely tell what is in your future. Stacking the deck a few times, she suddenly pulled out 3 cards and flipped them one by one. The mask. You will hide behind it. Not showing your true intent. The Reaper. It signifies a premature death. The Rosebud. It looks like you have a growing love interest. Seemingly becoming disinterested in the cards, she put them away and took out the dragon bones. She started chanting in an unrecognizable language. Suddenly she threw them on a piece of leather on the table. She gave a few humming noises, squinting her eyes at some of the bones. Nearly 10 minutes later, she was done. The dust and the spear stand close together, but the leaf intersects with the spear. The snake is reborn by the power of 6, but at a terrible price. Lastly, it looks like victory will be achieved through the moon. The old woman looked at him oddly before laughing slightly. You, my young man, have an interesting future, but I think it's about time you go. Standing, Jin fumbled in his pockets before pulling out a bit of cash. Oh, no, young man. Your fortune was mine to give, and you have now received it. Putting the money on the table, Jin responded. Nevertheless, you gave me good news, so please allow me to pay you back. Turning around, he quickly left. In the background he could hear an ominous laugh. Turning around one last time, the tent was now gone with no evidence of it having been there. Jin shuddered a bit before squinting his eyes, a mocking smile on his face. Walking a bit, Jin finally found Hanum leaving a strange tent that had spaceships on it. Hey, Hanum, I know you like Star Trek, but did you really have to get those glasses? Hanum was as stoic as ever in his response. They will surely help me on my path to justice. What if Naruto has hollow zanpakuto and bleach? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.